Warmly welcome to this Northern Dimension Future Forum 2021 event. Both everybody present here in Helsinki and also speakers and members of the audience via remote connections. Great to meet you all here and discuss this very acute theme of innovations and policy measures in relation to COVID-19 pandemic. First, a few housekeeping issues. First of all, as you hear, the sound may go round if anyone has the streaming on in their cell phone. So I would like to request that everybody would keep the streaming of this event off their cell phones or computers. Thank you very much. And about the event itself, we'll have two sessions this afternoon, cut by a 15-minute coffee break, approximately at 3 p.m. The first session includes keynote speeches and commentaries of several fields of COVID-19 in the Northern Dimension area, both live and via video connections. And the second part will have a panel discussion with Finland in the core. All sessions are in English. And my name is Mirja Kimimäki, and I'll be moderating the events. Special thanks go to the speakers and also the organizing and funding organizations. First, we'll hear video greetings from Northern Dimension, from EU, Russian Federation, Norway, and Iceland. Let's have a look.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, it is my pleasure to deliver this greeting on behalf of the European Union. My name is Michael Siebert and I work in the External Action Service as Managing Director. Northern Dimension Future Forum last year was organized with the theme Combating COVID-19 in the Northern Dimension area. Now, a year later, we can say that a lot has been done to manage the crisis. Internal and external actions have been strongly linked. Nevertheless, the latest news reminds us of two things. Firstly, the pandemic is not yet over. And secondly, the only way out of the crisis will be together. In the beginning of the pandemic, we saw a lot of measures taken on the national level. But the prolonged crisis has proven that rules-based multilateralism offers a sustainable way out of it. Failing to vaccinate people globally leaves fertile ground for new mutations that could come back to other countries. Solidarity and self-interest point in the same direction. This is why the EU is a leading donor to COVAX, the Global Vaccine Alliance. Furthermore, steps taken with the digital COVID-19 certificate have enabled us to gradually resume the mobility of people. The determining factor for managing the pandemic is the availability of vaccines. It is estimated that by the end of this year, we should already have produced enough doses to vaccinate the entire global adult population. Despite this manufacturing triumph, we are still struggling in the race to actually inject every adult in every country. This is a challenge both globally and within Europe. To date, more than 76% of the adult population within the EU has been fully vaccinated. However, there are still important vaccination gaps within the EU. National vaccination rates of adults vary between 29% to over 90%. Last week, in the annual conference of the Partnership on Public Health and Social Wellbeing, it was suggested that there should be comparative studies of why the willingness to take vaccines varies between countries. How to encourage people to take vaccines. In addition, what measures have been successful in achieving a balance between people's social needs and preventing the spread of the virus? There's a lot of room for exchanges in lessons learned, both now and in years to come. We must continue to have trust in science. It is estimated that the world will not get over the pandemic before 2023. It is hard to summarize the outlook for our post-pandemic world. It seems clear, though, that societies will be more digital, but also much more unequal. The pandemic has taken a particularly heavy toll on the elderly. According to the World Health Organization, the crisis has changed older people's daily routines, the care and support they receive, and their ability to stay socially connected. Partnership on Public Health and Social Wellbeing is committed to improve the health and well-being of the aging populations. Different social innovations can make people's lives easier. I would like to name as a grassroots example the project The Art of Staying Healthy. It is implemented by the Northern Dimension Partnership on Culture in collaboration with many partners. The project will develop collaboration between the art and health sectors. The aim is to pilot art interventions to improve the health and well-being of people. The selected projects will be implemented until November next year. The European Union is pleased to support the work of the Northern Dimension Institute and the Northern Dimension Partnerships. I encourage you to use this opportunity to identify shared challenges. We can then use our common tools to address them. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, dear Professor Kosonen, the co-coordinators of the ND Institute from St. Petersburg and Arkhangelsk, dear colleagues and friends of the Northern Dimension. I am very pleased to welcome you at the Future Forum 2021, organized by Northern Dimension Institute. It's our second Future Forum in COVID times. The pandemic changed our lives and our way to cooperate and to keep our dialogue alive. But our common actions continue. It is our best answer to the pessimism of the disease. I'm sure during the forum you will share a lot of good practices how to make our life better in these new circumstances. And we shall overcome all together. Let me start with some considerations of general character. In Russia, we consider the Northern Dimension to be a perfectly useful and important multilateral framework of cooperation in the northern part of Europe, and a unique platform where the Russian Federation, the European Union, Iceland, and Norway are working on an equal footing. Our common endeavor is to safeguard and to consolidate it. According to the national foreign policy concept, Russia stands for the maintaining in the north of Europe an area of trust and stability, based on the principle of equal and indivisible security. To this end, our country develops practical cooperation with the northern European countries, which includes implementing joint projects within multilateral framework with due consideration to environmental aspects and interests of the indigenous people. In this context, regional cooperation in the northern part of Europe is especially important. In these challenging times, it contributes to promoting mutual understanding and good neighborly relations between the countries. It strengthens economic, cultural, and humanitarian ties. It may help to solve common problems and reduce risk in a broad range of spheres. Such cooperation, on the basis of shared interests, goals, and responsibility, should continue to keep the European North from the Baltic to Arctic seas, a region of low tensions and positive sustainable development. In political dialogue and practical engagements, the political dialogue and practical engagements are the two fundamental elements of our interaction in the Northern Dimension. We highly appreciate tangible results of our cooperation within the ND partnerships and structures in the environmental, healthcare, cultural, transport, economic, and scientific fields. They have significant capabilities to improve the quality of life of people that live in our regions. Nevertheless, together we are able to do even more by making use of existing instruments or by exploiting new ways of cooperation. Here, your reflections are particularly important to suggest new fields and new tools to be developed. And we highly appreciate the youth participation and contribution to make the Northern Dimension more active, comprehensive, and forward-looking. The ND Institute is the best platform for it. Also, the removal of artificial obstacles such as limitations on financing environmental and transport projects that have a cross-border effect would also improve the efficiency of our cooperation. The Northern area has a unique range of other multilateral mechanisms contributing to the stability and good neighborly relations. I refer to the Council of Baltic Sea States, the Barents Euro-Arctic Council, the Arctic Council, the Nordic Council of Ministers, BCCS, Union of Baltic Cities, numerous cross-border and interregional cooperation programs. We are confident that a more structured approach as decided at the last ND ministerial meeting in 2013, political coordination and practical interaction, and also synergies among them based on the shared aims, meet the interests of the Northern Dimension policy and its stakeholders. As for the cross-border cooperation in the ND area, we are concluding current programming period of 2014-2020, in which around 500 Russian partners have participated in more than 350 projects in all the 8 CBC and transnational programs with our participation. Nowadays, we are preparing the new programming period with strong emphasis on the environmental protection, circular economy and clean waters, support to innovations, tourism, and people-to-people contacts, just to quote some of the priorities. We have also an increased financing opportunities due to the EU and Russian bigger common financing. We want to enlarge the geography of our cooperation, and we are preparing also our participation in the Northern Periphery and Arctic program with large area from Greenland to Finland for the time being. The agenda of the ND policy for the 2022 is rather rich. Russia will organize somewhere in spring a senior officials meeting. The parliament of my country is planning to receive in Northern Dimension partner parliamentarians for the new edition of the ND Parliamentary Forum. The Business Council will hold its traditional business forum in St. Petersburg on April 4th. To conclude, I would like to wish you an interesting and fruitful discussions that will surely contribute to moving forward our cooperation in the European North. Stay healthy, and thank you for your attention.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the pandemic demonstrates the importance of political cooperation with regard to challenges that do not know borders. I would therefore like to thank the Northern Dimension Institute for taking the initiative to bring us together for this important discussion. It is vital that we work together across borders, political levels, and sectors. Our cooperation builds trust, it enhances knowledge, and it gives the people living in the North a framework for exchanging best practices. These trying times have shown that this kind of dialogue is not only a strength, it is also a necessity. I would like, therefore, to take this opportunity to commend the Northern Dimension Partnership in Public Health and Social Wellbeing for its valuable work. Projects like the More Impact Together to empower Northern stakeholders, funded by the EU, underlines the concrete value of the practical cooperation on health that is taking place within the auspices of the Northern Dimension. On the 26th of October, Norway handed over the chairmanship of the Barents Euro-Arctic Council to Finland. One of the priorities of Norway's chairmanship of Barents Euro-Arctic Council was to promote health issues on the Council's agenda. We organized the first Barents Health Ministerial meeting in November 2019. And thereafter, the pandemic outbreak in March last year made the importance of international cooperation on health clear to the world at large. In December 2020, we brought together experts online to discuss digital tools for better healthcare. Our government found it very inspiring to listen to the insights of doctors, researchers, and young entrepreneurs. The 28th of September this year, state secretaries of Norway, Finland, Russia, and Sweden met to discuss further health cooperation. COVID-19 has undoubtedly had serious consequences for the people living also in the Arctic region. The Barents Indigenous Peoples Summit that Norway hosted on the 8th of June addressed the many impacts of the pandemic on the indigenous populations. As the world is still fighting COVID-19, we also learn and are forced to find new ways. The pandemic has led us to seek new digital solutions. There is no doubt that e-health and new technology will be an important part of future health policies in the North. The work on telemedicine that has been going on for many years is but one example demonstrating the value of knowledge and digital solutions to people in the North. The strengthening of the work on youth is one of the most important achievements of the Barents Euro-Arctic Council in the last years. In the Youth Summit, in the margins of the ministerial meeting held on the 26th of October, young people spoke directly to the ministers on what matters to them for future strong Arctic societies. We heard about the many young people who are struggling with mental health challenges because of these particularly difficult times. The remote location of northern communities makes them also highly vulnerable. And this has been underscored by the closing of borders due to the pandemic. The pandemic has indeed presented challenges right across the age spectrum. For example, COVID-19 has illuminated vulnerabilities in our systems, aimed to support active and healthy aging. This was the topic of the Ministerial Roundtable during last week's, in Stockholm, the Partnership Annual Conference of the Northern Dimension Partnership in Public Health and Social Wellbeing. The closing of care institutions for visitors, necessary to protect public health, hit older patients and relatives hard. Day centers and other activities were closed or had reduced opening hours. The Norwegian government has taken several measures to reduce social consequences of the control measures taken against infections. Guidelines and advice for the population have been prepared and updated. Grants were given to NGOs and municipalities to provide social activities among vulnerable persons. Many older persons were introduced to digital tools for communication. For others, the digital divide increased their sense of isolation. We must learn from the pandemic how to reduce isolation and loneliness during crisis, and how to communicate more effectively with vulnerable persons. Norway believes that a more systematic cooperation between the Northern Dimension partnerships and Barents structures could be useful, including between working groups and secretariats. This could indeed increase the Northern Dimension's contribution to cooperation in the European Arctic area. We believe that lesson can be drawn from the active cooperation within the Arctic Council and the Barents Euro-Arctic Council. Cooperation rather than duplication of activities must be our common goal. The Northern Dimension cooperation is about supporting and learning from each other. Although we are still dealing with the pandemic, we can also use our experience in planning our post-COVID-19 health cooperation. I believe we all agree that no country can provide all the health solutions on its own. In the true spirit of our collaboration, we must work together and share our knowledge and experience. I therefore look forward to the wide range of presentations on today's program. Thank you very much for your attention.
Dear friends of the Northern Dimension, it is my pleasure to bring you warm greetings from the Icelandic Minister for Foreign Affairs, Mr. Guðlaugur Þór Þórðarson. Iceland highly values the Northern Dimension. The Northern Dimension is a unique multilateral framework and a successful model of strengthening stability and building confidence in Northern Europe. Our last Northern Dimension steering group meeting was held on November 19th. I had the pleasure of chairing that meeting. In the meeting, the Northern Dimension partners had a thorough discussion and reporting from the Northern Dimension partnerships and the Northern Dimension Institute on current activities of our work in the Northern Dimension. It clearly indicated that steady progress is being made on all Northern Dimension fronts in spite of COVID-19. The building blocks of our cooperation, the 4 ND partnerships, have been working well and are producing concrete results. We take note of the increasing cooperation between the Northern Dimension partnerships and welcome the progress made. We also underline the continued cooperation and increasing synergies with other regional actors, such as the Council of Baltic Sea States and the Barents Euro-Arctic Council. Let me underline that Iceland highly values the work of the Northern Dimension Institute and welcomes this important meeting, the Northern Dimension Future Forum. Adapting to COVID-19 has changed the world and our region. All sectors of the Northern Dimension are affected, and there will be need to adapt to the epidemic in the future. Iceland therefore attaches much importance to this meeting of the Northern Dimension Future Forum. We very much look forward to follow the international expert presentations and the panel that discusses COVID-induced social innovations in the fields of transport and logistics, health and social well-being, and cultural industries. The meeting of the Northern Dimension Future Forum is importantly cross-cutting, future-oriented, and solution-seeking. I wish you a successful meeting on a very important topic.
Many thanks to all the partners of the event. This international university network, Northern Dimension Institute, serves the information needs of Northern Dimension policy, and this future forum is part of that. What have we learned from the previous events of Future Forum? Let's now hear the opening words of Professor Riitta Kosonen from Aalto University, that also is the lead coordinator of the Northern Dimension Institute. Riitta, please, welcome.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome from the bottom of my heart to this Future Forum on adapting to COVID, organized by the Northern Dimension Institute. In my opening words, I will use a few words to highlight the NDI and its role in the ND structure and also introduce you to the topic of our forum today. The NDI is an international network of universities, the coordination of which is funded by the ECDG NEAR, and we are very, very thankful for the financing. The NDI is coordinated in Finnish-Russian cooperation, Aalto University from Finland being the lead coordinator, and we also have 2 Russian co-coordinators, Northern Arctic Federal University from Arkhangelsk and University of Economics from St. Petersburg. We also thank you for your very good cooperation in this coordination. Our task is to bring science and knowledge base in contribution to serve the ND as a common policy between EU, Russian Federation, Norway and Iceland. Doing so, the ND serves the information needs of decision makers in the Northern Dimension partnerships on environment, public health and social well-being, transport and logistics, and culture. Here we have various publication formats such as the ND policy briefs, ND background papers that can be found also in our webpage. We also train researchers and experts in writing policy briefs so that their knowledge could be more easily reached by the decision makers. In addition, the NDI raises the overall awareness of the ND agenda and its role in EU decision making. In particular, we draw attention to the valuable concrete work that the ND partnerships on environment, health and social well-being, transport and logistics, and culture carry out in promoting sustainable development in the ND area and beyond. The work of the partnerships produces concrete solutions in various fields of societies. These include projects that, for example, reduce pollution in the Baltic and Arctic seas, promote cooperation in health challenges such as COVID-19 and HIV, promote digitalization of transport and emission-free transportation, and boost new business opportunities at the crossroads of creative industries and other sectors of the economy. Furthermore, I would like to mention the NDI's analytical role in building a bridge between various northern regional development agendas. Here, the NDI contributes to improving the effectiveness of various northern regional initiatives by pointing to potential synergies that could be created by taking advantage of overlapping and complementary activities. The theme of today's forum, Adapting to COVID-19, is continuation to our last year's forum on the same theme. Unfortunately, we are still in the middle of the turmoil. Our approach to the theme is future-oriented and solution-seeking. We give a voice to knowledge and experience-based solutions that enable societal adaptation to the new normal that is facing us. In last year's forum, we discussed adaptation strategies from the viewpoints of work and education, mental health, and attitudes and values of people. The forum underlined that the pandemic generates new forms of collective action to draw politicians' attention to the detrimental consequences of the crisis and to various bottom-up solutions created to combat them. Some of the solutions are temporary crisis-induced responses to overcome acute problems, but quite a few may be applicable also in the long run, especially those related to digital solutions in social communication, transport, organization of work, production of cultural events, and provision of healthcare services. The panel also reminded that not all solutions are socially and geographically equally accessible to everyone. Some crisis-borne digital services cannot therefore completely replace traditional ways of organizing work and producing services. Today, we keep in mind the lessons learned from the last year's forum and go further in discussing the viability of various adaptation solutions to the pandemic. We will do this by giving a floor to high-level research and professional expertise in the ND and the Arctic in the form of the expert presentations and a panel discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, the annual Future Forums are an important platform for us for delivering knowledge-based expertise and to raise awareness of the valuable concrete work carried out in the ND area and beyond. So let me once again welcome you all and wish you all an insightful forum day. Thank you.
Thank you, Riitta. So let's proceed in our program. One interesting and complex issue about all this is the decarbonization of transport and Northern Dimension ambitions towards net zero emission policy. This will hear a commentary from Dmitry Vasilyenko. We have a little sound issue from Dmitry Vasilyenko, who is a vice rector of international relations of St. Petersburg State University of Economics. Let's have a look.
Ladies and gentlemen, The Paris Agreement strongly suggests to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees. More and more countries announce their wish to achieve net zero emissions in the coming decades. Nevertheless, all the announced governmental measures summed up together will not ensure that global energy-related carbon emissions reach zero by 2050. Thus, besides immediate deployment of all known and available clean energy technologies, more critical steps will be needed. An example, cuts of investment in new fossil fuel supply projects and coal plants, phasing out of ICA engines for passenger cars, etc. An ambitious goal to decarbonize electricity generation will open wide room for renewables, mainly solar and wind, and nuclear power, but will bring massive curtailments for fossil fuels producers and suppliers. Oil production will shrink dramatically, and remaining supply will be concentrated in the hands of a limited number of low-cost producers. The market of natural gas can be more successfully adapted to the new carbon-neutral reality if natural gas is combined with CCS or transformed into blue hydrogen, which will play a vital role in industry and other segments unavailable to electricity. The transit to net zero raises a lot of questions: energy efficiency, security, adequacy and reliability of supply, and challenges caused by its political and social consequences. That should be thoroughly discussed. The thematic research project Decarbonization of Transport in the Northern Dimension countries is carried out in the framework of the Northern Dimension Institute think tank project, and originally was initiated by the Northern Dimension Partnership of Transport and Logistics. The project includes a study of all transport sectors: road vehicles, passenger and freight vehicles, aviation, maritime, railway, and pipeline transport. Unicon conducts this research project in cooperation with National Gas Motor Fuel Association. As a result of our study, we published analytical reports, policy briefs, and articles in professional journals. Humanity reached an unbelievable level of mobility just in 50-60 years ago. Regular people are now able to travel across continents in a matter of hours and to cover distances of more than 50 kilometers. Developed countries' motorization rate has reached 70-80%. While mobility is an important part of human life, cars provide a sense of freedom, comfort, and help to save energy. Modern infrastructure is car-friendly. That's why transport is considered to be inertial as to all fuels dependency reduction, which would require a technological leap and some changes in consumer behavior. As a result, fuel consumption kept growing and increased by 78% compared to 1990. The share of road vehicles in the global energy consumption reached 20% by 2018, over 2.8 billion tons per year. While maritime and aviation transport regulations are implemented by international organizations, road transport doesn't fall under international regulation. Road traffic flows are restricted by regional logistics. That is why emission control programs are applied either locally or nationally, and rarely regionally. Road vehicle CO2 emissions figure shows positive or stable dynamics with falls in crisis years only. Nowadays, COVID-19 sets controversial agenda. Every economic crisis in 1998 or 2008 or 2020 empowered green projects, green policies and green economic approaches. Global low-carbon competition between auto producers is getting stronger as low-carbon markets were established. Sustainable economics favor decarbonization strategies even during hard times. An example, sales of electric vehicles in Norway were maximal in 2020 and 2021. But at the same time, COVID-19 has slowed down decarbonization projects in most of the countries, as they cannot afford expensive fuels and stick to traditional ones. It has been proved that cars produce the major share of emissions. Their share in fuel consumption and emissions reaches 70% and sometimes even 90%, for example, for the view of Northern Dimension countries. Thus, road transport emissions control is the task for the nearest future for the entire region. We found following measures of emission control in the Northern Dimension countries' strategies. Technological ones: improving engine efficiency, gradual emission reduction, transition to low carbon and carbon-free engines, and development of electric road systems. Regulatory: fees for carbon and toxic emissions, road vehicle taxes, limiting the number of cars, low emission city zones. infrastructural. Road network and smart regulation, low carbon and carbon-free public transportation, public transport promotion, international transport corridors with carbon-free gas stations, and distributed generation. And social, environmental education, shared consumption, free access to public transport, provision of bicycles, and remote work. Analysis of transport decarbonization measures taken in different countries revealed that they depend on the level of welfare, size of economy, development of its sectors, transport and energy sectors configuration, population and its distribution, climate, size of the country, and available transport routes. Economic performance is the main reason for decarbonization. Higher welfare allows countries to make commitments that are more ambitious, promotes faster transition within the fuel and energy sector, and encourages the state and citizens to support new technologies. This might be demonstrated by the changes in favor of carbon-free sources. Higher welfare leads to the increase in the number of expensive electric and hybrid vehicles in the country. Nevertheless, the current situation looks frightening as ICE vehicles so far dominate in all northern dimension countries. An alternative infrastructure is underdeveloped in the countries, but Germany, Norway, and Sweden. Global competition of auto producers is growing, and European companies are unfortunately not the leaders of the race. Russian producers KAMAZ, UAZ, Ural, and VAZ prioritizes CNG and LNG vehicles, while Iveco, Volvo, and GAZ opt for a combination of gas-fueled and electric vehicles. MAN, DAF, and Daimler are focused on electric options only, and only Scania has the widest portfolio of proposals. There are 3 stages of carbon regulation. The first stage, ecological regulations are applied in order to locally reduce air pollution. Both tax and governmental regulations are aimed to both improve fuel and exhaust systems and facilitate traffic flows. The second stage is targeted to reduce greenhouse gas emissions overall. The countries attempt to accelerate development of alternative fuels by improving infrastructure, subsidizing purchase of alternative fuels vehicles, and providing tax benefits and preferences to their owners. The third stage presupposes promotion of economic shift to low carbon and carbon-free fuels. Sale and use of internal combustion engine vehicles running on oil fuels is prohibited. Vehicle emissions are strictly limited by the emission trading system, ETS. National policies analysis shows that there are 2 groups of countries. The first one includes more economically developed countries, Iceland, Norway, Denmark, Finland, Germany. These countries began to apply carbon regulations in the early 90s, and they successfully passed the first stage and are now carrying out the second, being ready to take the third step. The developed countries with the highest CO2 taxes are Sweden, Finland, Norway, Denmark, and Germany. There is a recently adopted Norwegian national ban on ICE vehicles, which will come into force in 2025. Denmark, Iceland, and Sweden have announced their readiness to take similar measures in 2030, while a number of German cities have already applied restrictions on ICE vehicles. Countries of average and low income, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, and Russia, are going through the first stage of decarbonization. These countries are characterized by lower CO2 emissions taxes or total lack of those. Low taxes can be seen in Latvia, Estonia, Poland, while Russia and Lithuania have not imposed any carbon taxes as of 2020. Some countries apply their national decarbonization policies, such as promotion of natural gas as motor fuel in Russia or biofuel in Latvia. Though northern dimension countries are different, we propose a decarbonization formula that fits all. Development of infrastructure, development of the market of efficient, low or carbon-free engines, transformation of users' behavior by means of the public service economy, distance work, two-wheel transportation. International regional collaboration to unify standards of infrastructure projects in different regions, experience exchange and implementation of adequate policies. Northern dimension future energy is like trolleybus. It's moving forward. It's all electric but still not carbon-free. It's all about traditional and evolutionary rather than revolutionary decisions. In Soviet times, trolleybus ticket was cheaper than the bus. You need to stimulate customers or they will stick to diesel. Trolleybus has its limits, as well as we have political, economic, and environmental constraints. But we're moving forward with confidence. Thank you.
Many thanks to Dmitry Vasilyenko. COVID-19 has had a special effect also on the Arctic, partly due to big distances and remote locations of living. Our next speaker comes also from the Russian Federation, and she's with us here in the auditorium. Please welcome Marina Kalinina, who is Vice President for Interregional Cooperation of U-Arctic. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm very much glad to be here. Last time it was 2 years ago, and it was a long break, actually. I'm here in my capacity of advisor to rector at the Northern Arctic Federal University, advisor for international cooperation, and I'm also affiliated with the University of the Arctic, where I contribute as vice president for interregional cooperation. First of all, I would like to thank the Northern Dimension Future Forum organizers for the invitation to speak, and I would like to express my gratitude to Professor Riitta Kosonen and your fantastic team at Aalto University for a long-term and great collaboration we have had for many years within the Northern Dimension Institute. So my presentation, the impact of COVID-19 to the Arctic region, does not claim to be a complete overview of the topic because the theme is very broad. I would like just to reflect on 2 points. First of all, how the pandemic's impact was made by policymakers within the Arctic region. And secondly, what impact the pandemic has to higher education and research in the Arctic. What solutions were offered by Arctic universities and by Arctic University Consortia. I do something wrong, I'm sorry. Yes. A response from the Arctic Council to the COVID-19 in the Arctic was given in spring 2020 at the Senior Arctic Officials Executive Meeting, when a briefing document for senior Arctic officials on COVID-19 in the Arctic was presented. The Arctic Council emphasized its leading role to prevent negative impact of the COVID-19 in the region, especially in rural and remote communities located far north. Here I quote, "The communities face unique risks and challenges as a result of both the pandemic and the actions taken to respond to it." The briefing document includes historical context, the analysis of existing public health actions, activities and policies in the Arctic, and it also focusing on consequences of pandemic and public health response. The document highlights knowledge gaps and identifies potential areas where efforts of all Arctic countries are especially required, including better policy planning, improving accessibility of data, and sharing information. In the briefing document, the main focus was made on remote communities. It was underlined that remote communities in the Arctic have an advantage since they can keep track of people entering the areas. On the other hand, if and when the virus is able to penetrate the communities, there will be many challenges. The briefing documents include substantial analysis of risks, threats, and the challenges connected to spread of the pandemic in the Arctic region. I will mention just some of them. Seasonal workers who work in the Arctic region have been recognized as a potential risk for communities, for local and indigenous people. A lack of social interaction had a negative effect to families, especially to indigenous families, when physical distance between young people and elders went to the contrary with their traditional way of life and culture, and as a result, it led to big emotional stress. The report emphasizes that climate change impact at the time of pandemic demands more coordinated actions from regional authorities and local communities. Like, for example, in the periods of forest fires we observed in different Arctic regions last summer. Such a disaster at the pandemic time led to huge mental and emotional stress for local population. Vulnerable persons in rural areas and remote communities are often at great risk in terms of getting access to healthcare services and good infrastructure. And during pandemic, this is absolutely critical. The pandemic so far has a negative impact to general knowledge production and research activities in the Arctic. Digital learning was not a success everywhere, first of all due to poor connectivity in some of the Arctic regions. And when big Arctic universities transformed their teaching online quite fast, many of small colleges and schools located in remote areas met big challenges. Field research, observations and monitoring have been disrupted in many ways in the Arctic, as well as many of the research projects face critical gaps. Pandemic was a big challenge for many of young scholars who are doing field research in the Arctic because they did not get any access to field sites, and this was also very critical because this is very important in the beginning of research career. We know that most of meetings of research groups and project teams have been shifted to online format, and that is not always sufficient for science communication and international cooperation. Co-work of international teams of researchers and educators, faculty staff requires in-person meetings from time to time. People need to have direct communication, to talk to each other, to understand intercultural context, to avoid different barriers and to come up to a common understanding. A good example of response, of collaborative response to pandemic in terms of circumpolar education and Arctic research was a joint paper that was published in Nature by leads in co-authorship of leads of international organizations, 3 leading international organizations in the field of Arctic research and education: the International Arctic Science Committee, the International Arctic Social Science Association, and the University of the Arctic. The papers focus how to build resilient Arctic science amid pandemic and after pandemic time. The authors affirmed the consequences of the prolonged gap in field research is critical for Arctic science. It will have a long-lasting effect and will relatively affect public decisions and economic investments in the region. When analyzing consequences of pandemic in local communities in the north, the authors stress lasting effect of COVID-19 to communities with such issues as health care, food security, significant economic losses, and transportation accessibility. The paper got a very strong input of indigenous scholars, and they emphasized that a very big threat in indigenous communities was a loss of key knowledge holders among elderly people in local communities. And by this, it means a loss of cultural traditions, language, and heritage. The paper also provides good examples how important to maintain international cooperation in pandemic time and to build Western science and traditional knowledge together to address the COVID-19 challenges. One of the examples, during the COVID-19 isolation, University of the Arctic network of indigenous colleges located in Kola Peninsula, Nenes Autonomous Region, Yamal, Taimyr, Yakutia and Chukotka used their partnership to create online learning solutions to share knowledge on reindeer husbandry, indigenous business, fishing and tourism. And with regard to the future of Arctic science, the paper concludes then that in post-COVID-19 time, Arctic science will be based on a global coalition and great collaboration among scientists, local and indigenous knowledge holders, policymakers, citizen scientists, to cooperate and also to coordinate global initiatives such, for instance, the next International Polar Year, a tool to maintain and build focus in polar issues over the coming decade. the University of the Arctic, to support its 200 plus member institutions from 8 Arctic and 14 non-Arctic countries, gave a response to the COVID-19 situation and digital solutions. The universities, colleges and communities worldwide met when the pandemic began. They published a statement that was supported by the University of the Arctic Board. And solutions offered by the statement include, first of all, lobbying digital connectivity in the north to support small colleges and schools located in remote communities. Also, increasing the number of online courses and sharing the courses between institutions. And to implement this, UArctic came up with a virtual tool, open access tool, which is called Arctic Learning Resources, that is absolutely openly available for everyone. It should be used and might be used by circumpolar educational community to help our members to avoid disruption in educational operations and to move more teaching online. Other solutions include developing proxy training from field sites research, co-design research and training protocols with local communities as a very important part of co-production of knowledge, and also to strengthen cooperation throughout the Arctic to build the necessary resilience and ability to adapt the next crisis the Arctic might face in the future. The COVID-19 pandemic theme in the Arctic occupies a huge space in local debate. Google's search COVID-19 impact on the Arctic gives 13.5 million results in English language and over 5 million results in Russian language. Today, experts in many countries agree with the statement that higher educational institutions should play a bigger role, they should play a key role in the pandemic recovery, in the transition to more digital and greener business models. The impact of universities should be measured not only by a number of scientific publications, articles and citation index according to a score in a World University ranking, but by a significant role the universities play in local and regional community, in driving local innovation and entrepreneurship. And in my opinion, it can be fully attributed to northern universities in all Arctic countries. Implementation of sustainable development goals, and as the WWF affirms, green job creation, as well as national and international policies to protect the fragile Arctic environment, call to contribute to the sustainable development of the region during pandemic and at post-pandemic time. And certainly the COVID-19 impact in Arctic research and education has to be carefully analyzed. There is a strong demand on urgent measures to improve connectivity, to give opportunity to small colleges and schools located in remote areas to develop online education and to develop equal opportunities with other educational institutions. There I'll stop to thank you for your attention, and I would like just to express my hope that strong international cooperation in the Arctic region within different regional formats and models under the auspices of the Arctic Council, within the Northern Dimension, the Barents European region, and within strong university networks will remain a vital resource and an engine that will help us to recover from pandemic and to go on further. Thank you so much.
Many thanks to Marina Kalinina. And one expression that we have all got used to is the new normal. What does it mean in occupational life? The next speaker is Sanna Kulmala from the development program of work and wellbeing at work from Finnish Institute of Occupational Health. Please.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're having a great Northern Dimension Future Forum here at Aalto campus, as well as everyone online. Just before your coffee break, so as it says here, my name is Sanna Kulmala, and I work in Finnish Institute of Occupational Health, where my team and I are responsible for leading the national work and work wellbeing program called Work 2030. So trying this one. Wow. Thank you. Perfect. Work 2030 is a governmental program of Prime Minister Sanna Marin. Responsible ministry is the Ministry of Social Affairs and Health, together in close cooperation with the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Employment. The program involves several work-life parties and institutions. As some of you already know, we have a very long tradition of bi-party and three-party cooperation to develop working life in Finland. Presenting you our targets in just very brief, our aim is to simultaneously increase productivity and well-being at work by creating new working life innovations using new technologies, knowledge and collaboration. Work 2030 program started in early 2020, almost at the same time with the COVID-19. And that naturally created new demands and dimensions for our work, which we would try to very quickly adjust in our planning. During last year, we gathered pandemic survival stories from different workplaces and individuals. We conducted research about remote work and provided development possibilities for different industries, such as musicians and event companies looking very desperately for new ways of work during lockdown and after. What I would like to share with you today is first some insights on the working life Finland during COVID, and second, some discussions and findings for designing the new flexible normal after pandemic, which we all hope will arrive one day. The discussion points have been created in one of our new working life innovation, which is also born in pandemic conditions. So I have a chance to share that with you as well. When COVID hit Finland, in working life, we benefit from our strong digital infrastructure and the already existing positive attitude and experience towards working remotely. Still, the scale even for us was huge. In this transition of work, we were ranked #1 in Europe with over 60%, more than 1 million employees having moved their work from offices to their homes and summer cottages. Our research shows that coming together in these exceptional circumstances have in fact increased the experience of trust in workplaces. One could even argue that this massive transit to remote work wasn't that much a leap of technology and digital ways of working, as it was a leap of trust. Those that have been working remotely during this time feel that employees and employers have been working closely together, finding new ways for fluent everyday work, new leadership practices and community elements, as well as safety and well-being. One of the biggest issues here has been finding good tools and ergonomics for home offices. During this time, people were experiencing a lot of positive autonomy and flexibility in their work. On the other hand, people working mainly remotely have been feeling more what we can call work-related boredom and even loneliness, especially among young people and people living alone. When asked how employees see themselves working in the future, over 80% wants to continue working remotely after pandemic. The average expectation of remote work days was 2.7 days per week. Majority of those who have been working present at workplaces in physical contact with their colleagues and customers say that they feel that their safety has been a priority and the community spirit has been strong, even stronger than before the pandemic. Of course, it's not all sunshine. Working in physical contact has increased the concern of infection and the future of the careers. And then, moving towards the discussion for the flexible new normal that was born in one of our innovation processes. The innovation is called Fast Expert Teams, and it's born in Aalto University thanks to the amazing professor Kirsi-Maria Prunkvist. Fast Expert Teams concept was born right in early days of the spring 2020 lockdown to seek different kinds of solutions in acute national crisis of COVID. During this year, we started collaborating with the LUT team by piloting, researching, and further developing the Fast Expert Teams concept in working life contexts. So what is Fast Expert Teams? Fast Expert Teams is a network of experts and developers creating solutions for decision making and supporting the workplace development. Our team, our Fast Expert teams consisted of over 80 experts who worked in different organizations across sectors and administrative divisions. The experts gave their time pro bono and shared their knowledge and skills to solve a common problem: how to design work and work life during and after pandemic. The work was carried out 100% virtually, using the digital house-based platform. Development sprint was carried out for 4 weeks, and after the results were handed out to the decision makers and the public. Solving the questions how to design a new ways of work. Fast Expert Teams discussed especially about 3 areas. First, flexible work concept itself. Second, effects that it has on employee well-being, community, and sense of belonging. And thirdly, learning and innovations. The key findings in this work can be put in just 5 or so important words. One size does not fit all. Our notion of work and workplace is kind of a melting and forming new streams and new possibilities, but also challenges. When designing the practices and policies for different workplaces, we should avoid on-off decisions and have a wide dialogue close to the different types of work and teams. Instead of defining where and how we are allowed to work, we should ask what's needed and possible for meaningful and productive work and happy community. The flexibility here is a huge possibility and advantage, but only if we are able to have an empowering, continuously dialogue, stay agile, and are ready to a true change. And finally, the innovative work of Fast Expert Teams stated that the designing the new flexible ways of work of future needs contribution from all different levels. Society enables with flexible working life practices. Organizations create framework and tools. Leadership supports. Community brainstorms and keep on having dialogue around new ideas and concepts. And finally, individuals actively recognizes their needs and are open for new for themselves as well as for others. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next presenter speaks through a video link from Latvia. Ines Vaivare is the director of Latvian Platform for Development Cooperation, and she'll comment on how we'll transform the crisis into sustainable resilience. Let's have a look.
Dear participants of the Future Forum, it's a great honor for me to be part of this event and share my COVID-19 experience. But let me share my screen first. Today, I would like to talk about COVID-19 as transforming the crisis to sustainable resilience. And I will combine both perspectives, my personal and my professional. But let me start with my personal. March 2020. I don't know what you did that time, but I was in my little town near Estonian border. And I was feeling quite high uncertainty and helplessness. But at the same time, I understood that if my country is in crisis, I have a will to do something to help. And I was brave enough to try something unknown, and that was hackathon for me. And with my team, we established volunteers movement, Stay Home, and now it's called Easy to Help. But I will talk about that a little while after. Talking about my professional experience, as an NGO person, as an activist, I was involved also in the strategic leadership group led by Prime Minister, recovery and resilience facility planning, and national level consultations. Innovations in time of crisis, but some numbers. These are the numbers from our volunteers movement. As I told, it was established just in hackathon, and in 1 month, we achieved number of almost 1,000 volunteers at national level who were willing to help those in need. It is a quite high number for my country. And 25,000, this is the number, how many posters volunteers were sticking around on the street, on doors, everywhere to reach out to people. 42 were partnerships. Actually, our movement was based on partnerships because we didn't have any specific financing from government or so, but we were using every resource we could find in our way. And that actually, in my opinion, was the most important part of our success. 30 were the requests per day what we received in our system, and I would say that it's not a very high number, and I will tell later my personal view why. Here you can see the poster, and just to tell shortly, the system was that it was mobile app, what was operated by young people who know digital tools and use them, and call center where elderly could reach out for help. And call center was operated also by our good partner who employs people with disabilities. And so the system was quite simple and easy to use, and I think that was quite important to be successful. And why we were successful, actually. First, of course, sense of urgency. And if you know theory of change, you know that sense of urgency is one of the most important perspectives if we talk about changes. And in this case, I would say that it proved it perfectly. After sense of urgency finished, many of our partners said that they quit, that they don't want to support anymore because they thought that the crisis is over and we are back to normal. Technologies, of course, because we were born in hackathon, connecting skills with needs. It might sound quite easy, but on the other hand, this means that we can achieve only effectiveness when we find the right people who actually have this opportunity to help and those who need this specific skill. And technologies can help, as they did in this case. Building on partnerships, as I already told, and actually that was my part in the team, building them. And I was on the phone, having many calls through the day. But I think it was something what also made me think differently about many things and have these conclusions that I will have after. Of course, a diverse team. We were so diverse from so different backgrounds that we actually complemented each other. So as a person who likes to read theories, I would say that this fits very perfectly with the theory of change. But most probably you also want to know, did we fail? Yes, we did. Because when this feeling of crisis finished, we understood that we need to build a sustainability, and that was the biggest challenge. The challenge was actually to integrate in existing structures because they were tailored for totally different type of behavior. And change of behavior is very, very slow. And the most important and interesting part actually was that institutions failed felt that if they will cooperate with us, that will be a sign of their failure, or they even felt that we are competing with them. And that was the surprising part for me, as I said, as a person who was working with partnerships. So my conclusion was that actually it's very important that institutions work as enablers. They are preparing environment for different innovations and social innovations. They don't see them as competitors. They see them as extensions, as something better that can achieve better goals. But as we see, maybe the systems that operate now, policy systems, are not tailored as such for these fast-growing social initiatives, social innovations. So if innovations are these usually these small, fast-growing tools, then the question is how we can integrate them, how we can make them more sustainable. And to be honest, we still have more questions than answers. And we've been thinking about that a lot. We've been testing, we've been having different pilot projects in municipalities. As I said, actually, it's contradictory in its very sense that people have used to stable systems, to reliable systems, and now we want to say that changing systems are good ones. Of course, we understand that all systems develop, but on the other hand, this changing environment, it brings quite high uncertainty for people, and they might want something to rely on. And maybe these all polarization views are going out not just of the disinformation, what we have used to say, but maybe it's also the change of environment, as my colleagues, as I saw from Agenda, will cover also after. Well-known authorities and trusting neighbors, neighbor next door in this case. This was something interesting also because we used to trust in authorities, but now we needed to trust in neighbor. And I must say that it's not very usual case in our country. And that was, as I said, I will come back to this point. It was the most important part why we actually failed, because people didn't trust each other. They didn't trust their neighbors. They didn't want to trust them. And what we needed to find these trusted channels, which were in that case family, doctors, and hospitals, because people were there when they had when they were infected by COVID-19. Champions versus high impact on vulnerable groups. This is again something we have used to think about champions. We want to see the winners, but actually COVID-19 mirrored a lot of different vulnerable groups, and the impact is still seen on them. And this is again different type of thinking. Of course, we all talk about leaving no one behind and sustainable development and so. But when we see it in reality, are the systems ready to react and to help these people? We saw that no, actually, this, how to say, objectivity and anonymity of our mobile app helped to reach out to those people who were by that or that case reason denied by institutions. Maybe even it was in the system framework, but the reality was that the system couldn't react enough effectively. And also complexity versus simple and easy. I've been a civil servant actually myself for 12 years, and I know how this works, how functions are diverse, and how each person is responsible for something. And it's quite complex for a person who is not comfortable with the system. Our success was because it was simple and easy. But on the other hand, simply and easy government doesn't sound realistic. So we are still thinking on all these questions. Is there some kind of middle way, something in between these two, if I may say, different poles? But let's see. This is our answer for now. Local community resilience. I would say that looking for an answer is a process itself. But what we have understood is that actually the first reaction, the most important reaction in COVID-19 situation was local community. Local community groups were real enablers to help to react. And these were these neighbors which were not trusted, but at the same time, we build this trust and we work on this very targeted. It might be a real answer because systems will not change so fast. Of course, it brings forward some challenges, so maybe it will develop some kind of parallel system. But this is, again, as I say, it is a process where we're looking for an answer and nobody knows that. Personalized trust, of course, because in communities we know each other, we can see each other, and we can build this trust more easily. Agility. This was something what I learned really in this process of this volunteers movement. We developed it step by step, doing it as effective as it can be at that moment, which is not usual case. For example, if we look from normal project thinking, which is quite usual thinking. Of course, projects also are agile, but as in my NGO world, actually they are big projects where you need to see the situation 4 years forward, and it is not possible to be agile enough. But it is possible at the local level, and we've seen many cases actually around the world when communities react and they say we don't want any project because actually they don't fit us. Resource effectiveness, also linking with the projects, but also seeing resources around us, using them in the most effective way. And global competences, this is a topic where my organization is working very actively on, just explaining it in an easy way. So this means that you understand your connection with the global world, you understand how you can react, how you can impact it, and you also have an opinion, you have a standpoint which is in favor of sustainability, of justice and democracy. So this was very fast journey actually through my experience, but I'm looking forward to building new partnerships, and it's a pity I cannot participate in person in this forum. But if you are interested in any issues that we do in global competencies or development aid or resilience, topic which we are exploring now, please don't hesitate to contact us, to follow us on our social networks. And I wish you a really fruitful and interesting day. Thank you.
Many thanks to Latvia. And now let's keep on the move, literally. Our next speaker is an expert of transport and logistics. Digital green and on the move, how does that happen in the era of pandemic? Our next speaker is Hermanni Bakker-Johnsen, the second expert of Northern Dimension Partnership on Transport and Logistics. Welcome.
Thank you for the kind introduction. So one afternoon, some 10 years ago, I was in Greece. I was sitting and eating a gyros. It's a kind of pita sandwich, if you don't know. And it was on a cafe on the island of Leros in the southern Aegean Sea, not far from the coast of Turkey, and where more recently refugees from Syria have been waiting for access to Europe. There was a van parked nearby, and I was slowly trying to recall my skills in Greek letters, and I read the word on the side of the van as metaphora. And with my limited language skills, I was really puzzled a bit. You know, what metaphors in a van? Wow, the Greeks, they are really civilized people. Until I realized that this word simply means transportation. And for me, this memory has kind of granted a kind of poetic aura around transportation and also maybe vice versa. So transportation systems, they move as humans and materials around our planet, and just as metaphors move the meanings of words in our minds. Anyway, I'm here to say some words about my current employer, and that's the Northern Dimension Partnership on Transport and Logistics, or NDPTL, where I started to work last May. The organization and the somewhat clumsy acronym was coined in 2008. And I know this is the Future Forum 2021, but if you allow, I will just start by recalling some glimpses from the past. So if you remember, in 2008, the world had slipped into an economic crisis, short but efficient. In America, we had something like this. In Europe, something like this. And in Russia, we had this. And at least to me, this feels like ancient history, even if this is only 13 years ago. So in a way, it means for me that we need to constantly keep working on our structures and cooperation organizations in such a way that we can make sure that they are actually answering to the realities of today. So, and as is the case for the whole Northern Dimension, the overall aim of the NDPTL is to strengthen the positive interdependency between Russia and the European Union and also the other partnership countries, and even preventing the emergence of new dividing lines in our region. But unfortunately, if you look at the things, how they have developed over the years since 2008, it's easy to feel somewhat disappointed about the overall aims and their achievement. But actually, it is exactly during this kind of challenging circumstances and where, of course, the COVID pandemic adds its special flavor that the intergovernmental cooperation structures such as ours deliver. If working, we can enable professional dialogue and personal contacts to continue and develop across the borders. It is of central importance that we can take care and fertilize these fragile flowers by all available means. This includes naturally events like this Future Forum, which enables exchange of thoughts and views not only across national borders, but also between different fields of human activity. After all, despite our differences, our joint challenges have not disappeared anywhere. As an example from my work, the steering committee of the NDPTL has identified some priorities for its cooperation around the transportation issues for the period 2019 to 2024. And these, in our work, it's decarbonization, digitalization, new emerging trade routes, a top point on reducing road deaths and serious injuries, and best practices in transport education. These priorities are implemented then via regular cooperation, which takes place during the meetings of NDPTL steering committee and then also the high-level meetings. But also, very importantly, the support fund we have in place, which is providing smaller projects with potential, with funding for fast forward these priorities. So I will in the next highlight two of these priorities, digitalization and decarbonization of transportation, and relate them to recent work within the NDPTL. So the first is digitalization, and here this is a field which has been a very rapidly developing field also, and shown its importance, especially during these turbulent times we are experiencing with the COVID pandemic. The ongoing 21 Lithuanian chairmanship of NDPTL have raised digitalization as a key focus area. And a key result of this work has been the approval of a new NDPTL project on mainstreaming and compatibility of digital solutions for a specific type of documentation, digital version of the transboundary cargo notes that is required by transboundary movement of goods. The project will run for the next year, and it will bring together expert institutions from Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, Poland, Finland, Denmark, and Russia. A key added value of this is the dialogue around the compatibility of the different systems across the EU-Russia border. And as such, it is an accomplishment, as this is actually the first NDPTL support fund project which has been funded since 2015. NDPTL has also last month established an expert group on digitalization, which will enable the involvement of more people than the project partnership to the discussion. On the other topic, decarbonization, we know that there is a pressing need to reduce greenhouse gases emissions from transport sector. And this was again highlighted, of course, at the recent climate change conference in Glasgow. And also the European Commission has launched now in July the Fit for 55 package of proposals to reduce the EU's total greenhouse gas emissions by 55% by 2030 as a step towards the full EU decarbonization by 2050. And as part of this package, transport will face a new stringent EU regulation, and there will be ambitious targets to cut more the emissions. And NDPTL, of course, needs to contribute to this work. One of the ways to reduce emissions is through electric vehicles. There is a need to go from combustion engines to electrification of transportation, and global transition towards this requires that we have the appropriate infrastructure in place, including charging stations for electric vehicles, not only in the urban centra, but also in areas with low population densities and long distances. So within the Northern Dimension area, this density of chargers, especially more faster kind, remains low in the northern counties of Finland, Norway, Russia, and Sweden, which are participating in the Barents Cooperation. And fast charging network is particularly patchy in the northeastern Finnish Lapland and northwestern Russia. So accordingly, the NDPTL Secretariat is currently engaged in a dialogue with the Barents Cooperation structures to launch a project on electrification of this northern corner of the Northern Dimension area. And while the practical focus is on road transportation, more specifically passenger traffic and personal vehicles, the aim is also to consider the crucial issue on cargo transportation and also other transport modes than road and other technologies, for example, fuel cells, which might be more suitable if the technology will develop as anticipated. So while new forms of transportation always have social impacts, these initiatives have not yet explicitly addressed the concept of social innovations, which were one of the main topics of this event. But this is, of course, an interesting issue which we should explore more in the future. And one example which springs to my mind is how such social innovations could be part of the transport framework. It could be the modern practices of transporting unaccompanied trailers on board ships. This is a common practice in the North Sea area, but less developed in the Baltic Sea. Besides the potential for environmental benefits, such sea transport of trailers could also enable a happier life for truck drivers who could drive home after delivering their trailer to a port instead of having to follow the trailer across the sea and back. This in turn would enable better possibilities to combine family life with the truck driver profession and thus make it a more attractive profession for the younger generation. So I hope this presentation has provided you with some ideas of the current and forthcoming work of the NDPTL. The lead of the Lithuanian chairmanship and the dedication of the other partners, including additional resources to the secretariat provided by Finland, has opened again the future of NDPTL and enabled some firm steps to the selected directions. The metaphor of a bridge is often used to characterize transboundary cooperation, such as NDPTL. International initiatives bring together people across the different borders we have drawn between us. However, as highlighted by the scholar Thomas Harrison, bridges do not only unite, they also have an implicit function to sediment differences. They enable contact, but they also control and limit it. And in this way, to avoid any negative sides of this, we should be really constantly keep upgrading our bridges via trying out new, better ways of doing things and also mixing approaches from different fields. And I'm really looking forward to learn more from all of you, and thank you for your attention. And if you're looking at our website, so please note that it is still somewhat stuck in the past, but we are working on it to make it to today's standards.
Thank you very much for this very interesting presentation, and sorry for sound issues previously. So now it's time for our keynote speeches. We have two excellent keynote speakers, Special Advisor Antti Huntus from Arts Promotion Center of Finland and Dr. Yuri Sumarokov from Northern State Medical University in Arkhangelsk, Russian Federation. Antti, welcome.
Yes, thank you. And good afternoon all, and thank you for this opportunity. I will talk to you about stability and sustainability, but I think I will start at instability. The accelerating climate change with all the side effects is increasing instability in societies. The connection to the individual crisis can be difficult to see at times, but like the complex entirety of the sustainable development, the sources of instability are also multi-layered and systemic. The unrest can be triggered by energy shortages, financial crises, human rights disputes, political conflicts, etc. But I claim that the real reason in the background is the huge emotional stress that arises from the fact that the future of all mankind is endangered. Now, culture has a hidden potential to create stability and to support sustainability. It directly affects, for example, our attitudes toward changes, our consumption behavior, and especially our ability to feel empathy, which is the source of stability. Through culture, we support experiences of meaningful life and the sense of inclusion, which are the foundation of stable societies. Of course, it can do just the opposite. Culture can also divide us and deepen our disagreements. But I will try to point out through Agenda 2030 Sustainable Development Programme what kind of a cultural activity can improve stability in our society. Okay, but first let's have a quick look for some key figures. We know that the creative sector has been badly damaged by the pandemic. It has been one of the worst affected areas of economy in Europe, slightly less than air traveling, but more than tourism. The restrictions made by the governments didn't treat all the fields of art symmetrically. These numbers are from last year when my background organization distributed almost 20 million euros more in the form of a COVID-19 support. Now, when you look at the different genres, you can see how strongly, especially music and theater or the performing arts, are represented in the COVID grants. These are the art forms that suffered the most because of the restrictions of physical contacts. Behind the figures, there's also the thing that most of the artists lack the security provided by an employer. There were almost 1.7 million artists and writers in the European Union area in 2020. 46% of them were self-employed. Now, this is much higher than the average of the whole European economy, which is 40%. So 46 to 40. These are the people who face the restrictions all alone without any safety nets. On the other hand, we have seen how some media companies have increased their sales during the pandemic, and at the same time, they have accelerated the consumption in certain arts. Typical examples are audiobooks and different streaming services. Here are the figures from Finnish Publishers Association showing how the sales of digital publications have grown exponentially. How is this reflecting to the income of the artist is a totally different story. Ministry of Education and Culture made an online survey on the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. 64% of the respondents told that they had developed new types of activities, and 44% of respondents had introduced new digital services targeted to the public. This was a quite big survey with more than 2,000 respondents, from artists to freelancers, but also from associations and companies. The survey also revealed that it takes a lot of time and resources to individuals to develop digital services, and those who responded told that it has not yet been economically profitable. As a part of the EU's recovery plan, it has been declared that 2020 will be the Europe's digital decade. This was also one of the recommendations I made for the Committee of the Future, who were thinking new ways for the creative sector to recover. Today, we hope to see some major investments from the Next Generation EU recovery plan to help different art sectors to go online. But at the same time, we are wondering how to do it in the middle of an ongoing crisis. It is difficult to innovate and be creative in the middle of personal financial problems. And I dare to say that artists are the source or the best innovators. As part of the government program by Prime Minister Sanna Marin in 2019, I made a study that included a proposal to establish a new fund to support the cultural sector. At the heart of the proposal was an idea that the fund should be built in a unique way between the public and the private sector. This new fund saw daylight few weeks ago and was launched with starting capital of 10 million euros. Of course, one of the biggest reasons behind this is the sustainability of public finance. If you look at the demographic trends and the services needed in the future, and also the predictable debt ratio, we cannot be sure of the adequacy of public funding, even if the private sector will never be able or willing to compensate the declining public funding. Coordination is still needed for more efficient and effective use of money. Over the past decade, Finland has sought alternative funding mechanisms to culture, but also a new political discourse at the same time. The biggest movement or discourse, which started between 2010 and 2014, is gathered around the findings that demonstrate how culture is promoting health and well-being. Particular attention has also been paid for the effects of culture on the viability of regions and the innovation culture of businesses. However, this has not been reflected in budgets significantly. Although the following statement is related to this same trend, I think that we need more new political discourse, and this is the connection between culture and sustainable development. Culture itself has not been in the heart of the Agenda 2030 program. The Scandinavian idea of culture as the fourth dimension of sustainability, alongside ecological, economic, and social sustainability, has not been taken seriously in the international debate. However, this is about to change. The theme can be expected to come up next year in the UNESCO's meeting in Mexico, which has a promising title, World Conference on Cultural Policies and Sustainable Development. We need a shift of paradigm in political discourse. Culture is not only an area that we must protect and treasure, but it's also an accelerator and driver for a more sustainable world. Anyone who is familiar with the Agenda 2030 program knows that there is no shortcuts to these 17 goals and 169 sub-goals. They need to be read with thought, and the systemic nature must be understood. The program is a result of diplomatic processes, and many of the goals may appear distant from a Western perspective. But it's all about our ability to apply these goals, to see them in a context of our own society and work. Now let's go a little deeper into this. Let's find out how culture can be a driver to achieve sustainability. I have here a few examples from Finland. The SDG 1, ending poverty in all its forms everywhere. Cultural services that are free of charge ensure that even the poor have the opportunity to experience art and culture. In the year 2019, there were over 53 million visits to public libraries in Finland. Libraries also arranged events and courses which had 1.5 million participants. Libraries provide an equal opportunity for self-development, but also they increase the well-being of individuals and communities, as well as experiences of inclusion and meaningful life. In many municipalities, they also provide facilities for art, and recent studies have shown that art and art-based activities have positive effects on physical and mental health. They improve the quality of life and happiness. So SDG 3, ensuring health lives and promoting well-being for all at all ages. All cultural activities that aim to increase interaction between people directly prevent loneliness. In Finland, young people who experience loneliness have been reported to take 3 times more medicinal products than others. They suffer from anxiety and sleeping difficulties. By providing more activities and hobbies for young people and connecting these leisure activities with the school day, they have already achieved major results in Iceland. At the moment, Finland is also striving to have its own national implementation of the Finnish model for leisure activities. And again, studies show that, for example, participating in the arts prevents loneliness and exclusion. The experience of inclusion that can be gained through art has a significant impact on mental health and well-being. And finally, if it was just about the amount of information, we might not tolerate injustice for long. However, sometimes information and statistics are not enough. We need cultural movements, which today can take a form of global campaigns, to get our attention and to raise our case into the public debate. Every day we get more data about the effects of the climate change, but it has only little effect to our daily behavior. Statistics are suffering from inflation. We need the creative sector to bring the information to us in a way that affects us. Storytelling, visualization, drama, cultural movements have a stronger impact than any statistic or fact. I jump now a little bit and go to the inclusion part. Just recently, the Committee for the Future, which is a part of Finnish Parliament, published a statement or a resolution. The committee has been working with the artists as a part of their job to predict and solve future problems. In this resolution, I think there's a very powerful message, and it deserves to be read aloud. We should promote the involvement of the arts in solving the most difficult problems, together with science, economics, and public administration. Thank you for listening.
And thank you, Antti Huntus, for this presentation. And now we have our second keynote speech and also our last part before the coffee break. And it will come from Russia. The next speaker is Dr. Yuri Sumarokov from Northern State Medical University of Arkhangelsk, Russia. He'll speak about telemedicine and its role in remote areas. Thank you.
Hello, dear participants. I want to tell you a few words about telemedicine and how it is used in rural practice in Russia. According to the formal definition of telemedicine formulated by American Telemedicine Association, it's the use of medical information exchange from one side to another via electronic communications to improve a patient's clinical health status. Telemedicine and e-health services are successfully used in rural and especially in the Arctic regions of all over the world. Look at the map of Russia. The total population density of my country in January 2020 was only 8.5 people per square kilometers. The population of Russia is distributed across the country extremely unevenly. Almost 20% of population are living on 80% of territory. For example, in European part 27 per square kilometer, in Asian part 3 per square kilometer. Very long distances and problems of availability of medical services have created the need for wide use of distance technologies and e-health solutions. To provide the urgent medical care in the long distances with low distribution of roads, we need to solve many logistical problems. Of course, there are going to be situations where personal medical attention becomes imperative. And if the situation is serious, it can demand air ambulance services. What if the patient is critical and the paramedic on board needs expert medical advice? It's in situations like this that telemedicine can help air ambulance services. With professionals practicing a wide range of specialties, it becomes easy to get the right help at the right time for air ambulance service everywhere. Telemedicine, it's not an easy to be implemented because of several problems which are facing. The first problem is availability of modern technologies. All telemedicine connections need to have high-speed internet and very high quality of video equipment. There is also certainty that some older people can't easily master the communication devices. So the security issues is a second problem. How to make sure that health database is well protected and the data in this database are securely encrypted. Using the regular video call, a doctor can find out confidential information, how to check that it will not be intercepted. So far, there are isolated risks, but they can become a serious problem if telemedicine is used everywhere. The third is the willingness of doctors to work with telemedicine. Doctors reluctantly accepted the computerization in polyclinics. Many professionals had difficulty learning how to use computers, resulting in delays in patient care and poor quality of appointments. The doctor cannot pay enough attention to the patient. In half of the appointment is spent on the entering passport data into the computer. Telemedicine technologies are more difficult to use, and the risk of making the wrong decision increase. The social consequences of the introduction of telemedicine for doctors are also important. Theoretically, this can lead to a reduction of the already few polyclinics in remote regions, which means that some doctors may find themselves out of work. The fourth is the patient confidence in telemedicine. Conservative-minded people who are suspicious of new technologies often turn to polyclinics. The expert believes that the trust of patients in telemedicine can be won by showing by a real example that there is a value of online consultation and remotely getting answer to questions about health is real. The more often people receive quality care from high-quality doctors, the sooner telemedicine will become a worthy alternative to searching for symptoms on the internet. Telemedicine should not be perceived as defective medical advice or medical medicine for the poor. Otherwise, the queue to face-to-face appointment will only grow because everyone will think that it is safer. Let me tell you about the history of this. Telemedicine in Arctic Russia was introduced in the 90s. The first Arctic telemedicine network was established with the efforts of enthusiastic team in Arkhangelsk Oblast in 1997. The first network was organized in the framework of international cooperation projects and with the support of the Norwegian Center on Telemedicine based in Tromsø. It became clear that trained staff and quality of communication lines were the main instruments of the telemedicine distribution and development. As part of the implementation of the federal project Information Infrastructure of the national program Digital Economy of the Russian Federation from December the 1st, 2019, thousands of rural health points and hospitals have been connected on the territory of Russia under the state contract on the Ministry of Digital Development. According to the order of the ministry, on approval of methods of calculating the targets of digital transformation, the number of online medical consultations should reach 50% by 2030. The document was signed by Deputy Minister of Digital Development in January 2021. COVID-19 changed the situation and attitudes. Since March 23, 2020, 24 online medical consultations have become available to patients with coronavirus in Russia. Legislation is very sensitive issue too. Telemedicine should be regulated comprehensively, investigating legal regulation for such issues as medical care provision, digital technologies, medical insurance aspects, licensing, and the protection of personal data. As the Russian Federation, the remote medical care model implemented in the country is incomplete due to the inability to diagnose diseases remotely. Such a restriction entails the appearance of a number of questions in other areas, the responsibility of the doctor, the possibilities of cross-border medicine or insurance compensation issues. For a long time, the growth of the telemedicine services market was constrained by an imperfect legislative framework. So in 2018, the telemedicine law came into force, according to which the doctor did not have the right to diagnose and prescribe treatment remotely if the patient had not been a face-to-face appointment before. The NGO, National Telemedicine Association, held several consultations with representatives of Ministry of Health to resolve the possibility of making a diagnosis during the initial treatment using telemedicine technologies. If a patient has objective examination data or information about this patient from a specialist in the form of a medical history or other reliable information about the patient's health, it's important to make it possible to make a diagnosis during the initial telemedicine consultation, especially in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. This legislative issue will be resolved this year. In mid-October of 2021, it became known that the Ministry of Economic Development of the Russian Federation had developed a program for an experimental legal regime for telemedicine. It's assumed that doctors will make diagnoses over the internet. The experimental legal regime program in the field of telemedicine will be launched in 3 years throughout the Russian Federation. According to the document, several clinics will take part in the experiment, around 4. Other companies will also be able to join the experiment if they will meet certain conditions. The telemedicine services market in 2020 demonstrated high growth rates in the compulsory medical insurance system and in the private medicine sector too. According to experts, the demand for remote consultation is twice, and for individual players 10 times more. Before the coronavirus, telemedicine service providers found it difficult to reinforce the benefits of telehealth with doctors. For example, from 2017 to 2019, the volume of the Russian telemedicine market grew only in $20 million. In 2020 alone, according to the various estimates, it increased by $35 million. On average, an online consultation will cost 3 or 4 times less than going to the clinic. For example, Sberzdorove offers one-time consultation with a therapist for only €6. The Scandinavia clinic said that the cost of a telemedicine consultation starts from €10 approx. Insurance policies that include only telemedicine assistance are also much cheaper than full-fledged voluntary health insurance programs, from 1.8 to 4,000 rubles only. Now telemedicine is widely used as a complementary service in most rural Arctic regions of Russia, such as Arkhangelsk Oblast, Nenets Autonomous Okrug, Yamal-Nenets Autonomous Okrug, Taymyr, Yakutia, and Chukotka. It's mostly used in sparsely populated areas where the distances are quite long and the delivery of health services is difficult. The most active use of telemedicine is developing in the Nenets Autonomous Okrug. For example, in now, 17 health centers are connected to a dispersed telemedicine network. Teleconsultations with Nenets Okrug hospitals and external hospitals are occurring every day with real results and high economic effect. This was a reason why Naryanmar, capital of Nenets, became a host for 4 international conferences in Arctic telemedicine. The conference participants from many Russian Arctic areas and guests from other parts of the world demonstrated a wide spectrum of different telemedicine and e-health solutions for Arctic needs. In 2012, 7 district hospitals and 8 outpatient clinics in the district of Nenes were connected to high-speed communication channels and equipped with video conferencing and telemedicine equipment. Today, Nenes has the best telemedicine network in the country. Thanks to modern technologies, doctors of Central Clinic receive research results from colleagues from the Nenes district in real time. Doctors conduct consultation in the form of online conference. At the same time, doctors have the opportunity to see the results of ultrasound and data on cardiac monitor, ECG, blood pressure, and pulse oximetry. The Nenes Okrug actively uses telemedicine for consultations with employees of medical institutions located outside of the region. In 2017, only 800 communication sessions took place. In 2018, 1,200. In 2019, over 1,300. In 2020, more than 2,000. Many consultations were provided by doctors from leading Russian medical centers. Thus, the specialists of Almazov Center, for example, gave consultation to district doctors more than 200 times last year. Today, the technical capabilities allow pre-hospital thrombolysis to be carried out on the remote consultation mode. For this, the office in the local hospital is equipped with mobile telemedicine counter, for example, which is included anesthesia monitor, resuscitation, and other equipment. The patient in the outpatient clinic is connected to a monitor which displayed all the data about his condition. And the same information is seen by the cardiologist at the Nenes Okrug Hospital online. And decides to carry out the thrombolysis procedure. The drug is injected into patient's vein under the supervision of a cardiologist at the regional hospital. The most important thing here is to decide on the procedure. In Yakutia, Sakha, according to the data of local telemedicine center, the telemedicine activities are growing during 18 years. Since the number of consultation was small at that time, but now it's more than 500 per month. When we look to the consultation spectrum, 60% are in cardiology and neurology, 20% in trauma and injuries treatment, and 10% it's acute surgery mostly. Sakha is one of the most actively using air ambulance territory. That's why it's very relevant for them and also has very big economical effect. In Chukotka, within the framework of the national project, a system of remote telemedicine consultation operates, which allows specialists from district and district hospitals and federal medical institutions to jointly treat special cases. Today, over 100 different images are received by regional center via internet per day. As a result, the project will be replicated throughout the entire district. It should be reminded that in the near future, equipment will be purchased for the development of the telemedicine in all the districts of the Okrug. And we are talking about the settlements of urban district of Pevek and other places. Treatment requests from Chukotka patients are directed to more than 40 hospitals in the country, including the national medical research centers. Documents, photographs, and survey results are sent through secure channels, and a protocol is formed based on the results. In the last year, about 300 telemedicine consultations were carried out, and then during this year, much more. The problem of availability of professional mental health care is always exist everywhere. Two large international projects are devoted to issue of medical health in the area of Arkhangelsk. First is called Improving the Provision of Services to People with Mental and Behavioral Disorders in Remote Areas in the Arkhangelsk region. And the second is on creation of a sustainable system of distance professional support in the field of mental health of the population of the Arkhangelsk region. This is an ongoing project now. I will not dwell on the promises in the project. They have already been announced. This is both the geography of the region and the shortage of medical personnel associated with shortage of mental health professionals, and the fear of referring to them. Often, in regional centers, The waiting time for an appointment can be up to 2 weeks. Thus, according to the official statistics, there are 2.7 mental health professionals per 10,000 population in the Russian Federation. It's only 3,500 patients per psychologist or psychiatrist. It's too much. And both of these projects are telemedicine-based. The purpose of the first project was to improve the quality of prevention and treatment of people with mental and behavioral disorders in remote areas of the Arkhangelsk by developing interdepartmental and intra-departmental interaction based in the introduction of information and communication technologies. To date, we have completed the following. There are several activities inside of the project well done. An expert network which was developing during last years, and this network has very strong connections with rural points, and the experience disseminated through conferences, articles, website, media. For example, the best medical website in the region is belonging to the mental health center. At the beginning of its history, telemedicine was mainly developed by doctor-to-doctor communication. In recent years, more and more space is occupied by doctor-to-patient communications. Mobile applications made it easy and simple to do this. The most popular applications in Russia are presented on this slide. It's SmartMed, Yandex, OnDoc, SberZdorovye, MyDoc, and Online Doctor, which is very, very popular applications. Millions of people use telemedicine services, and their number is growing every year. So in the near future, it's to be expected that telemedicine will increasingly include international collaboration of doctors. This will bring the residents of the most remote villages closer to the best doctors and clinics in the world. Let me thank you for attention, and I hope to answer your questions too.
And warm thanks to all the speakers and also the audience for the first part of this session. Now we'll have a 50 minutes coffee break and return after that for a live panel discussion. Thank you. Welcome back from the break. We'll continue now with a live panel discussing the case of Finland, from bottom-up solutions to policy measures linked to this strange era of pandemic we are living. And we have here a great panel of experts of several fields of life, and I'd like to introduce them now. So next to me here is Juha Kostiainen, Executive Vice President from Urban Development, YIT Corporation. Welcome. Next, there is Otto Toivonen, Professor from Department of Economics of Aalto University School of Business. Welcome. And from Mehiläinen Group, we have here Ossi Laukkanen, Business Unit Director. Welcome. And about Finnish event industry business will speak Juho Hiidenmaa, member of the board of the Finnish Event Industry Association and also Product and Account Director from Latam Group.
Thank you.
And from far from me, there is Maju Kyytsonen, researcher from Finnish Institute of Health and Welfare. And last but not least, effects of student life will be presenting views of Milja Leinonen, chair of the board, Aalto University Students' Union. Warmly welcome. So let's begin about this whole, as I said, strange time that we are living. We have seen a lot of these periods of opening and closing the society by now. Within a short time, there has been measures to various extent to restrict the movement and meeting of people. So how would you all say that, how does this movement of closing and opening been affecting to your special fields of interest? Maybe you could begin.
Thank you. Of course, in general, it's challenging to all the time thinking, can we have meetings? Can we meet each other? Can we have events? How do we operate there? Then we cancel the things as we have recognized. Then in our business construction, of course, the sites are running all the time and has been running, and that has been good. A little bit difficult also, but there it's quite same all the time. But then in office side, we change the instructions and people are coming to offices, then they go back to home and then they come back, and then we're changing the instructions and thinking all the time. And of course, it's all the time a little bit stressing and taking time from everyday activities anyway. So it's not easy, even though we have been able to manage it quite well.
Otto Toivonen, what do you think about that? Does it sound familiar?
To some extent, yes, but the viewpoint I would take is the one from is given to me through the GSC situation room, where we look at data all over Finland, and the main feature visible from there is that after the big slump a year and a half ago in April, May, things improved actually pretty quickly. So by August, October, we were more or less to the previous level. And since then, it's been quite steady. So this back and forth that we feel in our everyday lives isn't impacting employment, wage sums, or turnover of industries to any meaningful extent.
What about case of Mehiläinen and healthcare business? What does it look like?
Yeah, I think from the concrete point of view, the first thing that comes to mind is confusion. Especially from the customers or patients who are contacting us, and basically because we are the first point of entry in COVID situations, it's still kind of challenging us because the kind of directions or the kind of whole process moves around a lot, kind of like what we need to tell the customers and patients how to act in these different situations. Is it kind of open or closed or whatever? And I think the kind of main challenge is to how can we actually give the hundreds of thousands contacts the same information, which is kind of reliable and always kind of on time, basically. And that's something that has been really interesting. On the other hand, that we have developed different kind of tools for how can we actually give 200 doctors the same information, and to them give the same information to the patients. So confusion, I would sum up.
What about to say so customers of event industry? Are they confused also?
Yeah, I think that
shortly said.
When talking about events, it's difficult. It's hard. People are not. Many of the people in this industry are not feeling well. The corporates who are organizing the events, which we are serving as a producing these events, and they don't know what to do because the communication is so, in so many levels that it's with Corona Passport it's okay to have events, but at the same time it's better for you not leaving home. So they don't know what to do, and as well people who are taking the risk organizing concerts, theater shows, whatever, they don't know that should they organize the events or not. Are people coming? Are people buying tickets? Or if something happens, when do they have to? How fast they have to refund the tickets and so on. So it's really heavy in pretty much every level.
Yeah, I think we have all heard quite a lot about these struggles, and also the struggles of students. How's it been looking from student culture and also actual studying?
Well, obviously for students, it's been a stressful time. It's obviously been that for every field of the society, but I dare say that students are in a different situation in the sense that when you're young and you're, let's say, in your 20s, it's an uncertain time anyways. And for students, the life at the university and your studies is the one concrete thing that's certain or supposed to be certain in an uncertain lifetime. When you've just maybe moved out of your childhood home, you're learning how to be an adult, and to have this massive uncertainty caused by going back and forth with the restrictions, it's really putting a strain on the students and obviously on the student culture as well. When you're keeping in mind that the time spent studying is not just for getting a degree, it's also about learning how to be an adult, how to behave in a work context, how to learn all the necessary skills to actually be able to have a successful career as well. So it's really been a lot for the students.
All right, and what about from citizens' healthcare point of view, Maiju Kytsonen, what does it look like?
Yes, like the previous speakers described, I think the pandemic has placed enormous pressure on timely and understandable communication, and this has been very crucial in healthcare for customers because the guidelines have been changing and sometimes even overnight, and people are not aware of, for example, if they can bring a support person, if they go to a physical meeting, or should they, instead of a physical meeting, have an electronic appointment with a doctor. But also the customers have sometimes been demanding faster actions. For example, the symptom assessment service Oma-olo, which is widely used in Finland. Well, now we have a situation where we have a new variant and people are demanding faster actions, but actually if the guidelines are not updated, the symptom assessment service cannot also be updated to better suit the current situation. So it's very difficult.
This whole thing kind of gets back to health. So let's stick for a moment in a questions of health and healthcare. How well have people, for instance, older people, responded to this kind of need to go more digital, to understand all these digital platforms like the Finnish version Oma-olo or all these other distant means of healthcare?
Well, we did ask in our survey people if they have increased their electronic service use in social or healthcare, and actually in all age group, many people did assess that they did increase their access to online services in all age group, but more so in younger age groups, and mostly the age group that increased their access to online services most were 30 to 39-year-olds. So yes, the elderly people do to some extent get left out from this development, but there are also some elderly people who use e-services.
And what does it look like from businesses' point of view?
Yeah, I think we have some information and data from the elderly people using the services, and which is really nice to see that over 60 years old, maybe 60 to 80, they have been starting to use the services, basically as much as 40 to 50 and so on. So I think that's good development. But I think one of the interesting things is that the past 10 years I have been developing digital services to healthcare, and the question has been always that what is the kind of like the alternative ending from the elderly people? Basically that if we take out the physical appointments, so what it does to the social environment for them. And now I think it's interesting that the kind of like the whole thing has been turned upside down, because now the kind of like digital connection to the healthcare is basically the social kind of like the happening, and the alternative is that you don't have any kind of service if you don't basically use the digital service. So I think this is really interesting, and in some ways I think this pandemic has kind of created the much needed revolution that we can actually provide health services in Finland in kind of in a manner that we can actually hold up with resources, basically the costs. So we need this revolution, and it starts from the users. And after that, I think it's easier kind of make the change and give it a little bit kind of more efficient cost structure.
Is it good business to make a digital platforms for healthcare?
I think in general the kind of IT solutions for healthcare is probably a good business. We basically, or the majority of the business is just healthcare services provided by the professionals. But I think kind of like the same idea that how we could affect the cost structure of healthcare, basically not turn to the private side. It's if we just kind of digitalize the normal way of providing health services, it's basically the same business. But I think there is kind of the opportunity to make things a little bit differently. Let's say the digital clinic that we have been developing 6 years now, it's based on the chat function, basically. It's and the value is that it's not kind of like the linear way of doing those visits. Basically, that you have a customer, there is some kind of wait, then there is a customer. Now you can actually drive the production in parallel. So I think there's the kind of effectiveness and the also which turns to the cost effectiveness, and then we can actually effect on the cost structures of healthcare. But basically, I think it is a good business, and there is kind of these tools gives you opportunity to make good business. But in kind of like the other hand, there is that in the public sector, public healthcare, it will be more effective. So,
Otto, do you have a comment?
Yes, actually exactly on the point of view of using these digital services in the public sector. So we just had the health care reform bill go through the parliament. It was more than 1,000 pages. The word digital was mentioned twice, and it was not in relation to services, but it was in relation to managing knowledge flows within the organizations. And it's pretty clear that as a taxpayer, we would want a productivity improvement in public health services in particular, and I see no other way than going digital. And there are some silver linings in this corona cloud under which we've been living, and I think this is one of them. We just have to hope that the public sector follows the cues of the private sector in this respect.
It sounds a bit worrying even that we are in Finland and we should be kind of in the front of a digital revolution. So do I get the impression that we're not?
Well, if we're at the front, it's not a roaring revolution.
Okay. What do you think? Is that true?
In all sectors, we should be more active to utilizing digitization anyway. And of course, I have also followed the renewal of healthcare sector, and I agree totally with Otto that that's really big possibility. And I have also used theirs because they are taking care of via this occupational healthcare, and this DigiClinic is extremely good example and functioning really well. But in all sectors, we have pressure to have a more active approach, I would say, especially in construction, which I come from.
Yeah, we have all got to use kind of to remote this and remote that and everything. We work remotely, we go to doctor remotely, we study, and we even entertain ourselves remotely. How well does that fit into, let's say, entertainment industry?
Yeah, of course. Many events, especially in B2B sector, have turned into virtual, but of course we are making different kind of ways where people can get the feeling out of them. But anyway, in virtual environment, the one thing that we are missing is the one that people really are meeting each other and really networking with each other. And that's something that we have done thousands of different ways to activate people when they are renting their kitchen table at their home for their employer for the 1.5 year already. But still it's quite passive. And these are the emotions and feelings and the moments that we are missing, and I think that it's a problem that this is not working. And also even industry economical part of it is that we don't need so many people to build up these events. So the whole ecosystem is still suffering. Even that, like us, we are in LATAM, we are producing B2B and B2C events. We are in okay-ish situation with these compensations, but there's still a lot of people, small businesses, self-employees that are not getting any compensation out of it, and they are kind of either they are choosing some other business to work, or then they are just suffering and try to manage somehow. And I think that it's related also to your side in student life.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, obviously for students, someone said that there's been silver linings in COVID, and it's been like that for us as well. We've been advocating for having flexible modes of studying for years now. And due to COVID, all the universities and different education providers in Finland had to make this huge leap and learn how to use digital services in teaching basically overnight. And that's something, it's a pro that we want to hold on to even after COVID hopefully passes at some point, because it brings flexibility into studies. It allows people in different points of life, maybe those who have a family or work at the same time, to be able to access a lecture at the time that it's suitable for them. So that's a really good thing for us, but we want to have the option to choose and to have the social context of meeting people on campus. It's a crucial part of studying, and it's a crucial part for any setting to really find out who are the people who are struggling. Because at this moment, it's impossible for us at the student union and at the university to reach the people who are struggling the most. We know we can help those who reach out to us and who respond to our reaching out to them, but we're really worried about the students who we haven't heard from during COVID. And that's something you can't replace with a digital service. And we're really hoping to get that back once we get on campus.
Can I just add to that? So I'm happy you brought up the fact that this remote teaching is not a blessing for everybody. It's good for some, but it is definitely bad for others. And if, again, I look at statistics, one of the most worrying statistics is the number of mental health diagnoses, which shot up after summer 20, and especially in the age group of 20 to 29-year-olds, much more so than with the elderly. And it's a safe bet that that students in particular were hit. And this is actually something also going forward that one should worry about. The best students will do well in life, whether remote learning or on-site learning. But then those who are not quite as capable of have other difficulties in life, they will have more trouble if they don't have to come on site. And how to solve this problem? We faculty members worry about this a lot, and I would really appreciate hearing from students how to solve the problem. It's going to be a big problem in the future as well.
Yeah, definitely. And that's exactly the problem. What COVID has done is sort of polarized the field. We have those students who do really well under remote conditions. They find that they can do a lot more courses than they could before COVID. And it depends on the statistics and the measures we're looking at. If we're looking at averages, it's not really a robust measurement. if we're using that, then we get the sense or sort of false sense of security in looking at, oh, we still have this and this many students doing an average amount of courses in a year, when it's exactly those well-performing students who are sort of giving us a bias about the actual situation. So there will be a massive mental health debt to solve in the upcoming years. And we see that forming already. The queues for the Finnish National or the Finnish Student Healthcare Foundation are months long. It takes maybe 2 to 3 months to get a first doctor's appointment if you're experiencing any issues with your mental health, for example.
Sounds bad. Maju.
Yes, actually this polarization is can be seen also in healthcare contexts as, like, believe it or not, but over half of the population actually feels that face-to-face encounters cannot be replaced by electronic visits to doctor, for example. And at the same time, 17% of the population thinks that the services that they need are not available electronically. So there is still a gap in the service provision electronically, which is something that I believe that during the COVID pandemic, as it has been prolonged, there are new innovations coming all the time, and the service collection increases. But the question is, are distance services a good fit for healthcare? Well, it's a question that has not really been answered properly yet, and I think this digital area still seeks its place in healthcare.
So can we kind of assume that this COVID has increased the polarization in whole population in a way that there are those who are kind of tech savvy and educated and speak languages and have the top of notch technology with them, and those who are not?
Yeah, I think one could say that. And also since he mentioned those mental health services, like, it's a good example because mental health services the need for them has increased, and it's actually an area which has very much utilized the electronic services during the pandemic, and it has both been praised for it and also very much criticized. So we will see what will be the end of this. How will the services be provided in mental health care services in the future after the pandemic?
I think the kind of common understanding basically is that I have faced this before, even before the pandemic, that is pretty much black and white. You either have the digital healthcare or you have the physical healthcare. Nothing between, basically. And I think that's the common fear that every bit of the service is taken to digital. Basically, like banks have done that you can't access bank anymore. But I think kind of like this polarization conversation basically is, or I think there is a good chance that everybody is not using the digital service, of course. The tech savvies and the ones who are able to use it, they will use it. And we encourage them to use that. We are not kind of taking down the physical service providing. So basically, the idea is that the physical appointments will be saved to those who needs it. And we basically make room for the physical health centers. So basically the one needs that can be resolved in digital channels or with those tools, of course, then we take them to the physical services, and also the kind of the part of the people who don't want to use the digital service, they can have better access for them. So I think still that it, in that sense, this polarization is not a problem. Actually, I think it makes the services better, and actually it's just the opposite.
Let's talk a bit about the future lifestyle that can be induced by this COVID pandemic. If we think about the future city, what does it look like if people do everything in remote mode, or at least quite a lot of things?
In general, considering the whole concept of urbanization, which have been discussed also, I would say that urbanization is going on, and we can see that from statistics also. And then the question is, what kind are those cities? Where do we live? And I believe that more and more those are mixed-use type, where are residences, there are services, there are offices, there are good walking environments, cycling environments, public transportation. Those are mostly more dense anyway. Those are called, for example, 15-minute city or soft city or whatever. But I don't see big changes in that, because we have pressure from a climate change anyway, which means many changes in structure. But just now we really see the certain differences in popularity, and especially in Helsinki metropolitan region, domestic migration is going a little bit to the surrounding municipalities, like more peaceful areas like Järvenpää, Kerava, Nurmijärvi, Kirkkonummi. Those are increasing quite heavily. But then if we look, for example, city of Tampere, it is increasing the amount of inhabitants and much faster than surrounding cities. So we can't say that there is only one direction. And then considering Helsinki area, international migration is so strong. So anyway, the total increase of inhabitants are there anyway. So even though there have been some hopes that this will save the rural areas, we can't see that. That's my opinion.
So basically, we are not going to move to little villages with our laptops.
No, and if we look these Helsinki metropolitan area surrounding municipalities like Nurmijärvi or Järvenpää is extremely good example. They are developing their central area. They are not sprawled to everywhere. And same in Nurmijärvi, they have 3 centers there, and they are developing those. So any more idea is not to sprawl, but have a more solid structures in all areas. And I think that there will be those 15-minute city in Järvenpää and Kerava and others, and then in larger sense in really urban areas.
So
and of course there are this multi-locality phenomena for certain type of people who really can work everywhere, and which have that possibility, for example, so they don't have kids or whatever, so they can be in summer cottages or somewhere else, but that is anyway quite small amount of the whole labor.
So basically, we can say that COVID has, at least to some extent, increased people's willingness to, for instance, live in, let's say, suburban areas.
A little bit more, and they want to have a larger, in concrete, they want to have a large apartment, for example. If I look our production, last 1.5 years, we have increased average size about the 4 square meters, which is just the space for the working area.
So, do you have a comment on that? All right. May I ask Milja about this? Because you're probably the youngest of the panel. What do you think about young people's willingness to live in dense urban areas or less dense suburban areas? What do you think? What is the general atmosphere these days?
That's a good question. Obviously, I can only vouch for sort of my own sub-context of young people who've moved to bigger cities, maybe from sparsely lived areas, and wish to live nearby the university that they study. So that in itself sort of maybe answers your question. I feel like it's sort of normal for young people to want to live close to places where there are other young people. It's sort of the whole point of being young and just wanting to meet new people and network as well, obviously. It plays a huge role. I don't see why after graduating, at least in my own group of friends, I hear a lot of my friends thinking about moving a bit further away from Helsinki and Espoo, maybe to Kirkkonummi or Järvenpää. So that's definitely a trend that's happening there, people wanting to have space for their hobbies at the same time. But I don't, for the young people, I see the big trend of people wanting to move into bigger cities continuing in the upcoming years, because the possibilities to find suitable work and find suitable companies are just that much better in cities like Helsinki and the capital region in Finland.
How crucial is social life, especially in the student life?
It's everything, I'd say. It's so important. That's the whole point of studying. It's about making friends and finding your way in the world and building yourself as an adult. So it's been really a big struggle to have the COVID and not being able to see your friends. Like I mentioned before, the university setting, it's the most important psychosocial context for young people. Most of us live alone or in small apartments. When the lockdowns were on in Finland, for example, I live in a studio. I don't have anyone there to share the space with me, and I wasn't allowed to go out and see anyone except maybe outside if there was 10 meters in between us. So it puts a huge load on young people having to survive. Most of you guys probably have a family or a spouse you're sharing bigger apartments with. For students, it's maybe the 20 square meter studio, which is supposed to be your bedroom, kitchen, and living room at the same time, and having to live there all the time. It's quite an experience for anyone.
Maju, what does it sound from your point of view? Think about this discussion that we have had recently. One may have the impression that all the attention has been mostly on elderly people who are naturally on the risk. But have we kind of been leaving out of the public debate some groups of people, for instance, students?
Well, I don't know if I'm a good person to evaluate this question, but I think that I can really believe that students have been having a struggle, and more generally, everyone who lives alone, basically, because there has been restrictions, and at some points of the pandemic, there has been a really negative social environment, that it has not been acceptable to meet other people, even if you live alone. And I can't imagine how hard that must have been if you just have to spend all your time alone. But I have to say that what you had just described, that's what I did during the COVID pandemic. I moved to Järvenpää for a bigger apartment.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah, if I may comment, it's kind of funny in this situation when you have small kids and the family and so on, and sometimes it makes you miss the studio at the student life. But I think one of the interesting things is that kind of like the ways of working in general, basically the remote work and so on, and I've been thinking that how the companies that are built right now from the scratch, how are they building the whole kind of infrastructure? Basically, our unit, the digital health services, Meilän, it's about 300 people, and I haven't even seen 250 of them, basically, and everyone is everywhere. And I think maybe about 10 years ago, if you would say that there will be a team of medical experts who are actually treating patients in Lapland or wherever, it would have been kind of everyone would say that that's never going to happen, basically. But I think in this sense, there is still lots to learn. Basically, if you are leading that kind of team that you have never seen before, there is, because if we turn this, that what public sector in healthcare should do, it's not just the digital, basically, it's not the tools, it's the whole process. When the pandemic hit, everyone needed to go home, and then there is, of course, the health journal systems that you need kind of access from home, the VPN or Citrix, whatever virtual environment. And then you realize that, okay, we have 2,000 licenses, but actually there is limitation that 200 can access at the same time. So basically you need to kind of work the whole infrastructure that you don't basically end up in the situation that you have the resources and you have the model, but then these infrastructure necessities is not in place.
At this point, let's have a little round about the COVID passport issue. I think all of us have been following the discussion. Is it good? Is it bad? Where can we use it? Where should we use it? Is it kind of a solution for instance, all these problems we have been debating? So, what do you think about it?
I think it's important, and it's a little bit pity that we are a little bit late from that, because there was a time to develop the concept already. But especially important, it will be for employers that we should have also right to ask that. If I consider construction sites, for example, there are a huge amount of foreign stuff, even though, of course, we are demanding the Finnish working permit from everybody. But anyway, we don't know how actively they have been vaccinated, for example. It will be good if everybody should show that, yes, they have this passport, and that will help hugely about the operations there. Of course, same in offices, but especially in places where it's huge amount of people all around. And we support that yes, employers should have right to ask that. That should be really useful.
Otto.
So I wish we already had it. I don't understand why it's so late as it is, and I can see it help all kinds of businesses. So the event industry being maybe the primary beneficiary, but all other businesses. Talking of construction, it's actually the one industry with the lowest fraction of people with double vaccinations at the moment. Part of the explanation might be that those foreign workers have difficulty getting their vaccinations registered. So we have foreign-born faculty members, and they're twice vaccinated, but they don't have a Finnish corona pass, and so I can imagine that other people have the same problem, and that should also be solved. We're not talking a huge number of people, but still it's something to solve, but the sooner the better.
Can you possibly name some country that has that sort of model that could maybe suit Finland?
No, I don't know how the passports work in other countries, but my understanding is that the technical solutions are pretty much the same everywhere, and so it's just a question of making the decision to actively use it.
Comment.
I actually have an answer to this question. We just did an opinion piece, our student union, to Helsingin Sanomat last week about this topic, which we have the same problem that a lot of our international students they don't have the corona pass because they don't have Finnish IDs. And actually it seems to be a problem of the capital region, so you don't even have to name a different country, you can just name a different city in Finland. For example, Tampere has solved this issue by just providing flexible solutions to how the corona passes are being administered.
All right. What kind of ways? How have they solved it?
That I can't answer, but somehow, anyways, they've been willing to find flexible solutions, whereas in the capital region, the answer is basically just no. It's too difficult to organize that.
Very interesting. Ossi, do you want to continue?
I think it should be understandable. So either we use it or we don't use it, and if we use it, we basically use it always. because I have seen the past year and a half that how confusing this whole situation is and how the guidelines are changing. So I would hope that we use it properly and every occasion, everywhere.
For instance, workplaces, etc.
Yeah, everywhere. So it would be understandable, because I basically I think that people will understand that use it or you don't have to use it. So I would prefer that we use it everywhere.
All right.
Yes, first of all, yeah, it's great to have it, but we already start to demand it in last winter when we see that it's coming all over Europe and all over the world, and for example in Germany they do have a great program to handle it, but somehow the Finland have to do their own, which is not working as good as it should be. We are in a situation right now where you cannot read the Corona passport via the ticket reading system. You have to have a separate phone, the mobile phone, to read it, because it's not working in this system. And we have had the promises that it's within 2 weeks you will have it working, but it's the first 2 weeks was, I think, 2 months ago, and still it's not working. And also, but the law is not clear. So people are all the time asking that, can we ask the Corona passport or not? For example, for this event, are you able to ask it, or is it okay to ask? Or how about the Christmas party for the company? Is it okay to ask? Everybody want to have the events, want to meet each other, but they don't know that is it okay to ask? And what happens if I ask the Corona passport and it's not okay to ask it? Will someone sue us for that because we are not, because of the equal rights and so on? So yes, please, Corona passport, but the law should be really strict and the system should work easily, not like it's working now. But yeah, that's kind of short question in a big issue.
Yeah, it's something almost kind of tragic, or maybe slightly funny tragic, that even the president can't ask a COVID passport for the Independence Day party.
Yeah, it is. And at the same time that if somebody is holding a concert in arena and there is 13,000 people coming in, and how much it takes time to get the people into the arena if they have to have separate mobile phones to check first the passport, and do they have to check the ID or not, and then also check the tickets, and then also the security. So I would say that if you want to have the Saturday evening concert starting at 8, you have to ask people to come around at 8 in the morning in the queues.
Maiju.
Well, I could answer this question by telling something about the background of this COVID certificate, and well, in 2020, as much as 64% of people used My Kanta services, which is the online service where the COVID certificate was made available in mid-June, and since mid-June it has been to mid-October, it has been downloaded by 2.6 million people in Finland, and since we have I think 5.6 million people in Finland, so almost half of the population has downloaded it from this healthcare service, which is quite amazing, I think, that we have this service. But this is also probably one of the reasons why we have some issues that were mentioned previously, because the certificate uses structured information that has been entered into a client or patient information system, and because it has been written by a professional or electronically, like with artificial intelligence put into the system, it needs to be made there by a Finnish professional in a real Finnish service. So if you get the vaccination in like UK, it will not be in our Finnish systems, and therefore the COVID certificate will not know that you had the vaccination in another country.
So is the thing that there are kind of too many different kinds of exceptions in the whole field of vaccinations that it could work fluently?
Well, in order, without making changes to the service, a Finnish professional would have to input the data to our system for it to be shown in the vaccination card, which is not really possible, because if you have not given the vaccination, you can only enter data that you have yourself. If you are a professional, you can't just, if a patient tells you that I did get the vaccination, you can't enter this because it's not legit information, because it's not a service that you yourself provided.
All right, somewhat complicated. Milja, what do you think?
Well, I agree with the points the others have made about the Corona Pass. I wish we'd had it sooner. I wish we will get better guidelines on the details, how to use it. But in the bigger picture, it's made many things a lot easier for the students, especially because before this, when organizing any events, whether they be meetings of the representative council or parties, or to have a small gathering where people can discuss with representatives of a company they're interested in, we've always had to juggle with the latest restrictions from the regional administration, so Avi basically. And there's always been the threat of, if something happens, you will get a front page news in Helsingin Sanomat with a juicy title of like, we knew that young people are irresponsible. Look at this, they organized an event and there was a transmission chain with 30 people getting sick with COVID. So that's been like the big threat. It's like a low-hanging fruit for any media to have a story that sells when they portray students and young people as irresponsible party goers who don't care about Corona. So having the COVID pass it's really a blessing for us, because it gives clear guidelines on organizing events. If you have the pass, you're good to go.
Yeah, and also that there is a third party that is saying that this is how you should act. So the ones who are organizing the event, even if it's a business meeting or even it's a student party, then it's by the law that, okay, the law says that we have to ask it. That is not the way that we had to decide that we are asking you the Corona passport, and then the discussion is not between the organizer and the guest. It's the third party that's saying that this is how it should be done.
At this point, let's talk a bit about money. When this whole thing started, for instance, in Finland, quite a lot of money were allocated to businesses through the innovation fund, Business Finland. Otto, what is your view? How successful that operation was?
So I think it's best to first take a step back and remember that it was not only money through these subsidies for innovation or business development that were given, but a host of decisions were made. Some by the government, some by the central banks. So Bank of Finland, for example, purchased a lot of bonds from businesses. And so one has to look at the big picture. And in the big picture, I would say there's no quantitative evidence on this, but the one big decision was the relaxation of furlough rules, which allowed firms to let their employees go home. The system would pay a sizable fraction of their wages, and the connection between the employer and the employee was kept intact. And if I had to choose one policy measure that really had an impact, it would probably be this one. And so before you talk about subsidies to firms in general or any specific subsidies, you need to remember the big picture. They're just one part of the whole big portfolio of policy decisions. Then when we talk about the subsidies, again, it's important to remember that there were all kinds of subsidies available at different points in time to different types of firms. So say the hotel and restaurant business got their own special subsidies. The event industry got their own special subsidies later on. So at the Situation Room, we conducted a study for the Ministry of Employment and Industry for this purpose. And to be brief, what we found was that the subsidies had an impact. They were helpful in raising turnover. They were helpful in raising the wage sum, the number of employees, and a few other things. But mostly only those subsidies given out in the very early stages of the pandemic. So in March to May last year. Now, this doesn't mean that the subsidies given out later would not have had an impact. It's just that we didn't find one by the time we stopped our data collection, which was, I think, January 21. And so the subsidies you started with were the ones dished out first. And then the obvious sort of follow-up question is, well, why were they impactful if the other ones were not? Who knows? My guess would, you could say, oh, it's because they were development money instead of just paying for the expenses of firms. Could be. My money would be on the bet that it was just timing. You look at all the statistics, and April, May were dismal months for almost any business in Finland, and so getting money then was crucial rather than getting money in September, October, November, rather than the purpose for which the money was dished out. But that's my guess. But the results show that the money dished out early had an impact, and the money dished out later, maybe not.
How difficult is it for, let's say, in this kind of situation where the government has to do something quickly, and the situation changes very quickly? Now we know how it went, but in the beginning, of course, we didn't know what's up there to come. So how kind of hard or problematic is a situation where the government has to give money to society quickly somehow?
I think it depends a little bit. In the US, they basically rented a helicopter and just splashed out the money because everybody got money there, more or less. And so there are multiple ways of doing this. For sure, it's difficult. And like we know that the reason why the money in the early stages was given through Business Finland was because of legal restrictions of doing it any other way. So it's not like that was the best way of doing it. That was the only way of doing it quickly enough.
Juha, what do you think about this?
I agree totally, and considering Business Finland's role in that situation, it was difficult, and normally they're looking for R&D or innovation type of applications, and now they have a totally new approach, and I think they survived quite well. And then I agree also that the first months were really important. If I consider from our point of view, April was the most confusing, and we stopped all the starts of new apartment projects. And after 1 month, we realized that was total mistake, and then we boosted again because the housing business has been running well all the time. But we didn't know and take that kind of or took that kind of approach. But very soon we realized that it's changing, and finally, as Otto said, that the whole economy has running quite well anyway, amazingly well, I would say.
How does it look like from event industry's point of view?
Well, it was the compensation have been good for the industry, but I think the main issue is that we are a new industry. The event industry is something that people haven't really think about or the government haven't really realized that there is this kind of industry ongoing that is more than 2 billion euros and 20,000 full-time employees plus 100,000 people partly employed, and also because they don't recognize the industry, they don't understand how the industry is working, because it's like the whole ecosystem is like a spider web of different size of companies to the self-employed people, and that's why the compensation haven't been equal to everyone, and it's still not, and that's the main issue. So it's some of the companies will get quite good money and they manage quite well, but still some of the small companies or the biggest ones are not really get the same amount like the mid-sized company, which are in the best environment. But yeah, it's good, but there is still some hiccups to fix.
Do you think that, for instance, different fields of businesses have been kind of in different situation or maybe in uneven situation somehow?
Yeah, inside the event industry, yes.
For instance?
For instance, theater have made a good money out of it because they have had the normal money they get from government, for example. But they haven't had the costs they have to make because they don't have anything to show for the people that the money have come like it used to be, and at the same time small companies which are only like one-person companies who are everything they get into the company they are paying out as a salary, but the compensation have include everything else but the salary in it. So the small business owner haven't get anything out of the compensation, and at the same time they have get this 600 euros per month from the unemployment money, and in the situation where you have loan of some of equipment and you have a family and you get quite good amount of money per month, and suddenly it will be taken away, and you predict the 600 euros per month is not much if you have to pay housing for the kids and so on. So there is still quite horrible stories out of these families that haven't get pretty much any money out of it.
Can I ask again from Otto about this in a way that at the moment it seems that we have seen these reports that at least some companies have been kind of forced to pay the money back because they have been not kind of innovating anything new. They have been kind of just living day by day, hand to mouth, and using the money for paying wages. And so are we having now some sort of a backlash about these sums of money?
So there are these individual stories. I'm not sure they are really a sort of big phenomenon. So you would expect anything like that to happen when you do things in the kind of haste that they were done a year and a half ago. So if anything, I think the distribution of money, given the speed at which it happened, it went surprisingly well. Something one has to understand when you do something like that is that money will go to firms and individuals who don't deserve it, quote unquote, whatever that means, and some who would, quote unquote, deserve it don't get it. Because you're shooting with a shotgun and therefore you can't hit every fly with it. It's just the nature of the business. What I would be more worried about is the ongoing subsidy schemes. So it was quite all right to support firms a year and a half ago. Just now the parliament is deciding on another 100 million of support to firms. And I don't really see any justification for that. one has to sort of separate two things. So an economist looks at from two different angles at any question almost at all. One is how big is the cake we can bake together, and the second one is how big is anybody's slice. And the subsidies given out a year and a half ago were about preserving the size of the cake, our ability to produce good things for all of us, and that was in danger. And then, of course, you can say there are all kinds of tragedies, and it's not like I don't take them seriously. Don't get me wrong. It's a tragedy is a tragedy, but more or less everybody was hit one way or the other. And then the question is, do you need to compensate somebody for the fact that his slice is today smaller than it was a year ago? I've seen businessmen who say, look, I would have made so and so much money if Corona had not hit, and now the government should pay me the profits I'm foregone. And I'm like, why are you a capitalist? If you want to socialize your losses, let's socialize your wins as well. And now we're in the business of socializing the losses instead of keeping the capacity of producing as big a beautiful cake as possible. And I'd rather be in that business than in the business of slicing the cake differently.
Let's continue with the cake issue. One thing about it is kind of a gap between generations, and many have been saying that that people who are already employed, they are kind of holding up to their chairs, and young people, students, for instance, don't get into the labor market well enough because they are staying at home, literally. So, question about that: what do you think about it? Has the slice of cake become smaller for young people and students?
I think it's going to be in the future when we can tell that for sure. But I feel like future looks a lot more uncertain than it did before. I'm lucky to be in the field myself, studying healthcare technology, where I know the future prospects are going to be good. Just like Ossi was explaining, the field is thriving, and it looks like people are going to need healthcare anyways in the future. But what the students are really worried about is, and what COVID has impacted is, well, first of all, the amount of student-suitable positions available. That's something that affected immediately, especially summer 2020. There were not summer jobs available then. It was a bit better this year. But the big question is about having the opportunity to work alongside your studies and being able to learn the working skills, the work-life related skills that you need. Because at least for myself as a student of technology, that's something that's expected when you enter the job market. You don't just graduate in 5 years and then show up at the job interview with your degree certificate and say, here I am. You're going to need some proof that you know what to do, you know how to act in a work context. And that's something that the students are worried about, the ability to have those opportunities available for us.
If you could have a peek on the crystal ball, basically, what would you say within 10 years? Is, for instance, your generation being worse off than, let's say, 10 years, 20 years older generations?
That's a real, I don't know if I dare answer that question. I don't have the data available to make that prediction, but what I do know for sure is that the future looks a lot more grim than what it did for the generation that's 10 years older than I am. The hope that my generation and those who are the same age as I am have for the future has really been, it's taken a big hit. Because it's become apparent that everything can crumble overnight, basically, and that you shouldn't maybe make the kind of investments for yourself that might not end up working in your favor in the upcoming years.
Mai, what do you think?
Well, this crystal ball is interesting for me because there is a follow-up study in Finland of people born in 1987, which are the so-called well, this financial crisis was very hard in Finland in the 90s, and this generation were kids during that time, and we now know that this generation is more socially disadvantaged compared to other generations. So, but I don't know if we can like predict something from this knowledge that we have, but it's very interesting to see how this pandemic affects well, young people and kids of today in the future, in the long term.
So if we talk a little bit like lighter or kind of more positive aspects of this, do you think that there is kind of innovations made during the COVID era that are here to stay, that actually make our lives better in the future? For instance, Juha, what do you think?
I suppose there are much that kind of things, and especially the general flexibility of society, flexibility of organization, how fast we're changing the remote work mode, and all of that pressure which we are now facing. I mean, for example, how much we are at offices, how much we are remotely, what is the right mix? Everybody is thinking that what kind of office spaces do we need? And we as an office developer and constructor, we also think how much they are needed, that what should we do? And I think there are much influence to, in general, how do we work in future. That's one important part of that. And then I won't point it out anyway, this face-to-face importance, and as we know well from research also, the concept of tacit knowledge, which is crucial part in innovation, so that are needed, and I don't believe that we just are remotely all the time. But in that area, yes, and then many smaller incremental innovations in all businesses are there, even though our business which are not thought so innovative in general. So we have been quite flexible to make new kind of solutions, for example, residential layouts or smart building technologies and that kind of things. So in general, yes, that has put a good pressure for every of us, and will change hugely amount the way how organizations will work, I believe.
So basically the innovation could be that we simply can do things differently.
Yeah, and that's good, and we realized that we really can do. That was good learning for us.
Otto.
I'm sure all kinds of good things are coming out of this. I think we've already today heard many of those. And one should understand that necessity is the mother of invention. And I think we've seen that over the last 18 months, and it will carry us into the future. So yes, all kinds of problems, but I think this opened up all kinds of opportunities. If I want to mention one, or maybe actually two, one is this probably improved the appreciation of the importance of science. So where would we be without vaccinations, for example? The other one is the importance of data. So understanding what was happening, like you were telling how you were in the dark in April and you shut down all new construction sites. That was mostly because of the uncertainty of what was going on. And we've learned that data is actually extremely helpful in getting us a better understanding of what's happening right now, even though it's not going to necessarily tell us what's going to happen 10 years down the road.
Ossi.
Yeah, I think this has been really the golden time for healthcare innovations. We have seen Oma Olo helping basically the COVID processes, and even though it's really kind of concentrated on this particular topic, but anyway, I think that will boost the development. But I think kind of this kind of relates also to the future generation and what the future really looks like for them. And I think this has shown that we can actually think differently, even though that the majority of the people will say that we will never use this kind of digital doctor chat service. But still, after 4 or 5 years, 40% of Mehiläinen's doctor visits has been made in digital clinic. So it's massive. And I think in normal circumstances, we are fast and really innovative. But I think the kind of spring 2020 was something that I have never seen. Kind of like all the resources was put on the development. We developed AI and total automation for so many different things that will remain. And there is, I think, twice or triple the productivity that we can actually provide services. And also at the same time we were going outside Finland, and we have the company Be Healthy, and we could actually immediately kind of start kind of giving out our experiences and help other countries, and also at the same time do the same in public side. Because I think what will change is that it's kind of old-fashioned how the whole IT infrastructure and the service providers work in healthcare. I just can't kind of get myself around how can you pay 200 million for some IT system that we have that and more, and it took probably less than 10 million, and so on. So I think this is the thing that will change in healthcare. So we actually are courage enough to make different kind of approaches and maybe count on the future generation and the innovations that have been popping out past year and a half in healthcare industry.
Maju.
Yes, well, I would like to draw attention also to the fact that there has been so much hype going on in especially digital healthcare services, but I believe in other digital services also. And even though 85% of the Finnish population assesses their internet skills good, it's still every fifth of the population that feels that they need help in using social and healthcare e-services. And every fifth is a lot of people, and it's not just the elderly. And there are also problems in accessibility of electronic services. And this is also not a question of only the elderly. It's every fifth of 20 to 54-year-olds who feels that every 10th of this age group feels that the electronic healthcare services are not accessible to them. And I am not sure if we as a country share this understanding that the services that are being developed, they should really take into account different user groups and not just be designed for the tech-savvy working age people, but for many different user groups.
I really need to comment on that. I don't disagree, but I think one of the problems is that we are trying to design services for everyone, and it will not be optimal for anyone after that. So basically, I think how we need to kind of create the user base so that we can basically tutor the users how to use it, but we need to start from the ones who can actually access the services. And after that, we need to kind of moderate or modify the service to be accessible for everyone. But I think that this is something that I have been seeing quite a lot, that we can't actually do anything because we can't do it for anyone. And I think that's really dangerous, and I hope that is changing now, that we can actually start from someone and then continue to modify it for everyone.
Well, at least in public healthcare services, it's not an option if we design services only for certain user groups. We have to have services that are in theory accessible to anyone. and not just certain people. But yeah, I do understand what you mean. And yes, we have been making compromises, and maybe the solutions that have come up are not optimal because of that.
Juho, what do you think? Are there innovations that are here to stay?
Yeah, definitely. First of all, virtual events. We have done these before the COVID, but really make them effective. It has been a creative leap to build up events that are really interesting and really change something in people's mind, and also technical side, the capability of doing virtual events in a great quality, in a broadcasting quality, and that one will stay. In some points, it's more clever if you have, like, for example, in big pharma industry, where they have strict messages to share to the target group, which is all over for example, in Finland. It makes more sense to organize really one or two really good quality virtual events to get the target group and really share the information. And these are the tools that will stay. And first of all, I think that really the whole society have recognized the meaning and how important thing is really to meet each other and really to have events, how important they are for the people.
Milja, what do you think about it?
I'm not going to elaborate anymore on the digital forms of education. I already mentioned about that later, but instead I want to build on what Otto mentioned about the role of science here, because I think that's really key. I hope that COVID has opened the eyes of policymakers and politicians to the role of science, education and research, and most importantly, the funding available for that. Someone mentioned vaccinations, but it's not only the vaccinations, it's all the technology that we've been relying during COVID, the Zoom platforms, the Teams, the wireless speakers you have for your hybrid meetings. All of these technologies relying on the fact that there was funding for the technology that they take advantage of, let's say 20 years ago. So the role of the basic funding for all the universities is key in Finland having the competitive edge. If we want to make innovations that can give us some kind of advantage in the future, that means that we have to have the funding for the institutions that provide us with both the technologies and the educated people. And that's also key in us being attractive to international talent in the future, because we will need the international talent to make up for the big generations retiring soon.
Kind of follow-up question to that. Do you feel that Finland has been running this whole thing enough with science in mind? I mean, for instance, I have been surprised several times how many people actually there is in Finland who don't seem to believe in science, at least in general means. So what's your feeling on that?
Well, I think the policymaking in Finland, at least from my point of view, has been based on science, and it's been portrayed like that in the media. But obviously, in the bigger setting, we're living in the time of fake news and people questioning the reliability of the mainstream media in general. So that's one of the big mega trends affecting every society all over the world in the future. So I think Finland's done well. But the times we're living is really putting us through a challenge in that aspect.
Maju, what do you think about it? Are we running everything enough with science in mind?
Well, as you said that there are some people who don't believe in science, but I don't know if that's the case. It might be more about that. This COVID-19 situation is so complex phenomenon that it's very hard to explain to people who are not professors of epidemiology or other special fields, and maybe researchers like myself are not always best at explaining things in an understandable way. So I think it's more of a thing that communication issue.
Let's have one more little round about how well have we been learning new things during this pandemic. If we imagine now that this, let's say that it will soon be over, and then 50 years goes and another big crisis, maybe pandemic, maybe something else happens. How ready are we, and have we learned something crucial from this one? What do you think?
I think we have learned much, as I said before, and I'm sure there will be some crisis before the 50 years you mentioned anyway. But always we don't know what are those next crises, and then it's difficult to preparing for those. But hopefully we have get certain, which we call nowadays resilience, which helps to tackle with the next ones. And I believe we have at least get something new for that.
Aalto.
I think we've learned a lot, and the next crisis will nonetheless surprise us.
That's probably quite true.
Yeah, I agree. I think we are now stress tested, and we weren't ready at all when this started. But I think it's a matter of speed, how fast you adapt to the situation, and I think healthcare now has kind of like the basics, and you never know what happens, but at least we have some knowledge and kind of maintaining processes that will help us in the normal influence or whatever. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, if it's a pandemic, then we have a ready toolbox to handle. But well, I don't hope any big crisis like this is upcoming years. But at least I believe that these leaps we have had during this pandemic, we have more tools in our toolbox. So yes, I hope so.
That's good.
Yeah, the pandemic has given me hope that we can solve big, complex issues if we have the will to work towards a common goal. And what I mean by that, usually you hear people saying that, do we have the same direction? Are we moving towards the same direction? But what we should be asking is, are we moving towards the same point? Because with COVID, we definitely, as a society, have been working towards our way towards the same point, which has enabled us to solve, basically revolutionize the way we live in a really short amount of time. So that's positive news, and I hope we can take advantage of that when solving, for example, the sustainability issue that we will have to find solutions for in upcoming years.
Maju.
Yes, well, in healthcare, the pandemic has definitely accelerated the digital development, and the attitudes have changed so much during this time, and I think it will benefit this healthcare in the future a lot. Yes.
Thank you. And at this moment, I think we have used our time almost by minute. It's 16:50, at least in my clock. So now I would like to thank you all for very interesting conversation, very, very fresh and nice and interesting views. And also big thanks to all the audience, both here and via remote connections. And finally, I think we'd have conclusion words from Riitta.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks to the panel. This has been really impressive. I'm giving you the regards from the ambassador, Jari Vilen, who unfortunately regrets he's not able to be present here. We have this new variant of COVID, and that has again changed everything. So he's really taken busy with reorganizing all the activities ahead. So we can't reach him now, but he has been following this and he has sent us our regards for today's seminar. First of all, this has been impressive and very positive. The topic and the way how we have treated this COVID adaptation is by nature positive, because it is about future solutions. So positive solutions. So thinking about ahead, what to do, what have we learned, how have we developed things. Which means that despite the fact that we are facing and have been facing and will be facing a quite difficult COVID era, there's kind of a silver lining being in the air all the time in this event. So one very concrete aspect that has been repeatedly come up is the digitalization, the DigiLeap, and also the fact that because of COVID pandemic, we have had to take the digital leap, and that has really been very helpful, for example, in remote areas, as we have heard in several presentations in today's speeches and panel. And also it's been a pleasure to hear about the business opportunities that the silver lining includes, and also that this can result into cost efficiency that will be increasingly needed in the more and more constraining budgetary constraints that we are facing in societies. So these are few of the comments. Also to mention that many of these changes and many of these innovations are already permanent by nature. And by that, we have to also include the point that's come up very, very many times in the discussions, that not all the solutions, even though they are permanent by nature, they have to be adapted more and more to fit various kinds of individuals in order to evade polarization of how people are available to use services. How will this affect societies at large in the future? Everything relies on youth, young people. How will this affect their mental thinking, their values, their ways of looking at the world? What kind of problems have emerged? How will they see polarization symbolically also? What kind of mental state and mental kind of toolbox will the young people have as they go on and take the charge as a next generation? Also, because of this, we are really very much looking forward to see the next generation of innovations. Because now we've been able to innovate to a certain extent, and we have come up with certain kind of polarization problems and accessibility problems. But what will you do then when you have all this wisdom and you take the next step with the innovations? What will that be like? We are very curious to see that in the future. And finally, Ambassador agrees and emphasizes the point taken here with many of you. We need more and more a knowledge-based decision-making culture. This is one lesson that we all agree. And my personal point here is that this is exactly what we are doing at the Northern Dimension Institute. We are trying to serve the decision makers in Northern Dimension partnerships with information and knowledge and research and professional expertise. So thank you very much, everybody here and remotely, and a big hand to this forum. Thank you.